It's my pleasure to call the order of this meeting of the Oversight Committee. It is now 9 o'clock. Ms. Payne, please proceed with the roll call.
Dr. Cummings?
Here.
Mr. Margot?
Here.
Dr. Hernandez?
Here.
Mr. Montgomery?
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Patel is absent. Dr. Rice?
Here.
Dr. Rosenfeld?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Members, Presiding Officer Patel notified me prior to the meeting that he would be unable to attend today because of urgent business. Is there a motion to excuse Presiding Officer Patel's absence?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Members, you have the draft minutes from the February 16th Oversight Committee meeting in your agenda packet behind tab 1. Are there any corrections to the minutes as circulated? Hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the February 16th Oversight Committee meeting.
So moved. Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Our next agenda item is public comment. Texans created CPRIT. Opening our meetings with public comment underscores the board's commitment to transparency and accountability. Ms. Doyle, has CPRIT received any requests to provide public comment?
No.
Hearing none, we'll move on to item 5, the Chief Executive Officer report. Mr. Roberts will provide the Chief Executive Officer's report now.
Thank you, Dr. Cummings. I will speak to the items behind tab 2 in your meeting books. First of all, as I always do, I'll report on the available funds for this meeting. If you approve the 17 recruitment awards that total $48 million, we will have nearly $84 million remaining for the rest of the fiscal year for awards. One of the items that I always enjoy bringing to your attention is new staff. Today I'm very happy to report that Dr. Arya McGee, Arya, you want to wave your hand? She is our new program manager for product development. She recently was with the University of Houston as the Associate Director of Industry Ventures at the Office of Tech Transfer and Innovation. Arya has a PhD in plant pathology and microbiology and a bachelor's in bioenvironmental science, both from Texas A&M University. So please welcome Arya to the staff. Great addition. Another more of an operational item is it appears at the request of several of the members that we will be able to provide you with distinct email addresses related to CPRIT. You should be hearing more about this in the weeks ahead, but this will allow you to segregate your CPRIT activity from your other personal accounts that you may have. So we've made some advance in that respect. The next item is I want to discuss just a little bit, sort of a preview of the product development review project that you will recall Dr. Patel instructed us to take a deep dive into what was going on, why we were having a decline in the number of applications that were able to get through the peer review process. At the appropriate time in the agenda, we will be laying out some significant proposals for a redesign. This will be the most significant redesign, I believe, of any of the 3 programs in CPRIT's history. At the appropriate time, I will have Kristen Doyle speak to the proposal. We are under a little bit of a time crunch to get the proposed new RFAs out for reasons that Kristen will explain, but these will be RFAs that we hope to be able to make awards next fiscal year. Again, it's important to note that even without Dr. Patel's November instruction, we were going to take a deep dive to understand why product development had become comparably stagnant. What you will hear is a major team effort that began in November and continues to this day. Kristen spearheaded the project and has done most of the heavy lifting. However, all team members, Ken Smith, Tracy Davies, Michelle LeBeau, and some others significantly affected the proposal. I am extremely proud of what you're going to hear about later in the meeting and excited about the opportunities for product development going forward. I will next report on the upcoming joint meeting of the Advisory Committee and Review Council chairs. As previously reported, Dr. Patel requested a meeting with the chairs of the three advisory committees, the University Research, Product Development Research, and Prevention, the chairs of the three corresponding review councils, and CPRIT program staff to discuss cross-program priorities and ways to minimize any silos that may exist between the three. The meeting has been scheduled for the afternoon of June the 20th. It will be a Zoom meeting, but it will be, because of the interest in the number of Oversight Committee members, it will be a formally posted public meeting, as I said, albeit via Zoom. There is an extremely good chance that additional CPRIT business will be conducted at that day. We anticipate needing to bring forward a new RFA for bridge awards related to the product development program. That could likely be discussed. And of course, anything else that we can get out of the way that day, provided there's time, to make the August meeting less demanding, we will try and do. If you'll recall, the August meeting is always an extremely busy one for us with year-end activities. Finally, as I think all of you are aware, Tracy Davies and I went to Israel 2 weeks ago in order to identify companies that might be willing to establish a presence in Texas. This was, I think, an extremely successful trip based on the information we have today, and I've asked Tracy to give us a brief overview of the trip. Tracy?
Thank you. You can hear me okay? So as Wayne said, from April 29th to about May 7th, Wayne and I went to Israel with the Texas-Israeli Alliance, a nonprofit organization that works to establish economic and strategic ties with Texas. We went to Israel. Our interest in Israel stemmed from the fact that, like Texas, Israel is a true leader and excels in health innovation, especially in areas of artificial intelligence, machine learning, database generation, data analytics. And so we had three purposes in going. One was to raise the profile of Texas in Israel. Israeli companies in particular are their long-term prospects depend on leveraging the U.S. market, and so we wanted to raise our profile there. Two, we wanted to exchange ideas regarding the use of public funds to incentivize innovation and the development of a life science infrastructure, which is part of our statutory charge. As you know, there really are no analogs to CPRIT in any other state in this country or anywhere really. But the Israeli government is particularly adept and has been very successful at using government funds to incentivize innovation, convergence of technologies to sort of materially advance healthcare and bioscience innovation. So we had a lot to talk to them about, and we were able to do that. And then thirdly, we really wanted to establish, as Wayne referenced just a minute ago, particularly mutually beneficial relationships with the institutions, the government agencies that incentivize innovation, and private companies that might be interested in having their U.S. headquarters in Texas. And I think we had a tremendous trip. We were given remarkable access to all the leading institutions, venture capital and private equity firms, and then several companies that have a particular interest in Texas. And I'll just list some of them. We met with the Weizmann Institute, which you probably have all heard of, as well as their commercialization arm and their translational research arm, the directors of both of those institutions. We met with multiple representatives of the Technion, which is the equivalent of their University of Texas, MIT, Caltech all together, and directors of Technion departments that are of particular relevance to CPRIT. We met with all the leaders of the Rabin Medical Center, including the head of their cancer center and the head of their innovation department. That's the largest medical center in Israel, and they also have the largest patient database that we're aware of, and so it was very interesting to talk to them about how they leverage that. We met with the head of oncology at Ben-Gurion University, who has started several companies and actually is coming to Texas in October, so we'll definitely follow up on that in the short term. We also met with folks at the Sheba Medical Center, which is also a very high-profile organization. Some of the venture capital and private equity folks that we met with include Arkin Holdings, Amoon Ventures, Ion Labs, and the Israeli Biotech Fund, who actually is headed by a gentleman named Yuval Kabili, who is from El Paso. Of all places, and was 1 degree of separation away from many folks that we all know. And all of these institutions and organizations have a specific interest in Texas, so it was really exciting. And then there are some specific companies that we met with that we are optimistic may be able to establish ties in Texas, and they include Lava Digital Health, Car Medical, Metasite Diagnostics, and IBEX. And we've begun follow-up with all of these organizations. Thanks.
Unless there's any questions,
Just a quick one. What is planned for follow-up?
So
How
at
long
this
meetings?
at this point, we already have Zoom calls established with at least one of the companies and the head of the innovation center, which is quite impressive at Sheba Medical Center. The woman who is in charge of the Israeli Innovation Authority for the next couple weeks, and then she'll become the trade minister for Israel, has tentatively extended an invitation for CPRIT to speak at their annual Biomed Innovation Conference next year, and we'll begin working with their particular biotech convergence program in Israel, and see if there's opportunities for a formal or informal collaboration and sort of a pipeline communication with her. So we have follow-up set for that. Dr. Amishay Maravitz, who I mentioned was the head of oncology at Ben-Gurion, is coming in October, and he would like to establish relationships for his stellar residents to work at cancer centers in Texas, establish relationships here. He's very entrepreneurial. He also has a really interesting database. He treats the Bedouin population. They go to Ben-Gurion Medical Center, and they have a very insular genetic makeup. And so he's interested in collaborating with us, and we have follow-up set in October with him, but probably more calls in advance of that. Those are just the ones I can think of off the top of my head, but we have a lot of moving pieces. Okay.
Yes, Dr.
Yes, sir.
Rice.
I was just going to ask if there was any aha moment or really great takeaway that you came to having sort of been through this experience.
I think there's probably several. It was a very wonderful learning opportunity, I think, for both of us with respect to how Israel structures its databases and the data that they collect, and their willingness to work with us to both have access to some of those databases for researchers in Texas, and also maybe model some of what we would like to do after various protocols that they have learned work. Other aha moments, sort of the flip side of that coin is they face many of the same challenges that we do, so that in some ways knowing that you're dealing with the same problems is sometimes helpful as well. Those are two that stand out for me.
actually, the one that I would like to report on is, and several aha moments they had. In that a number of the companies that we talked to have a U.S. presence, but it's on the east or the west coast or Chicago. And the delegation that was led by George C., who's the chair of the Texas-Israel Alliance, was a great combination of individuals, the preponderance of which had some interest or background related to oncology. So it was not just us. So, of course, we developed new friendships and relationships with that. But the mix of personalities was such that we kind of ganged up on a couple of them. Tracy, because of another project that we're working on, has at the tip of her tongue a list of the great assets Texas has in the bio-life sciences in terms of research and commercialization activities. And so we were able to tick those off and chastise them for lack of due diligence in considering other parts of the United States. As I said, I think there were some aha moments, and I was extremely pleased. I felt like we'd connected with one company, but within an hour of leaving, the CEO had reached out about, when you get back to Austin, we want to do it, and that meeting has been set for the 26th of this month. So it was good, and I'll kind of add the conference that Tracy mentioned. It was the week after we were there, so obviously it wasn't going to pan out. But I am extremely interested in getting us on that agenda for 20 or 30 minutes. I figure I'll send one or two of the staff to that. But this will be an opportunity. What was it? It was going to be a couple of hundred companies and institutions where we can make the pitch, make the presentation for Texas, make the presentation for CPRIT. And Israel has been described many times as a target-rich environment, and I really think that it was. So I was very, very pleased with coming away from the meeting. I wish you could beam me up, Scotty, and not have to fly there and back. It was shorter than a trip D described last night, but it was long enough.
Thank you.
Dr. Rosenfeld.
Just a quick question. Have you thought about how you could leverage bird grants to accomplish more companies and more research?
Bird grants?
Yeah.
I'm not.
I'm not familiar.
Didn't mean to catch you. We could talk about it later.
Okay.
Well, we're always ready to learn more.
Very good. Any other questions? Thank you for that excellent report, Mr. Roberts, Ms. Davies. Fantastic news. We'll move on to item 6, the Chief Compliance Officer report. The chair recognizes Mr. Burgess to present the Chief Compliance Officer's report.
Beat that.
Okay, I think I might try. You'll find my report behind tab 3. I'll be brief, maybe mildly comedic today.
We'll determine that.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Mr. Margo caught me off guard with that. Yeah, I'm speechless. I did want to highlight just a couple of areas from my report. You may recall in February, in our delinquent reporting, we were sort of over our threshold of 5%. We are back under that, which is good news for us. You also may recall that from February, we looked at the data, identified one of the grantees that really accounted for about 60% of those delinquent reports. We did have an ad hoc training with them last Friday and went really well and really identified some of those issues. So we're hoping to see different behavior moving forward. So, but again, as of April 25th, we had just 13 reports that were delinquent, well under our 28. The other item I wanted to highlight is training and support. We are very big on how we can best support our grantees. Over the last 3 months, we had several training opportunities, and we had a new grantee training for UT Rio Grande Valley. Went very well. We had 4 new authorized signing official trainings. So our rules call for anytime there's a change in ASO, we have to do a training with them within a certain time frame. And we had one with Pelican Therapeutics, Magnolia Tejas, Cilia Therapeutics, and the University of Houston. And lastly, we conducted our first series of grantee training webinars in March, and we had just under 300 grantee staff attend those. For each grantee, we require the ASO and at least one other grantee staff to attend those trainings. They can send multiple, but we have a minimum requirement. So again, we are all about how can we assist, how can we, make following the rules fun. So anyway, that's my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Are there any questions for Mr. Burgess regarding his compliance update? Very good. Turning to the certification of the award slates that we will consider today, Mr. Burgess will provide the compliance certification report for the recruitment awards presented today.
Thank you, Dr. Cummings. And I forgot to say that you look great in that chair.
Aim to please.
Loudly.
You'll find in the proposed grant award booklet on page 30, my compliance certification. This was made available to you in the portal. Memo was dated May 5th. I've reviewed the supporting documentation, including pedigrees, sign-out sheets, third-party observer reports for applications submitted for the recruitment of established investigators, recruitment of rising stars, and the recruitment of first-time tenure-track faculty members. And I'm satisfied that the CPRIT's review process was followed, and I certify these award recommendations for your consideration this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Are there any questions?
After all the excitement of the compliance report, I just wonder if we need a break so people can kind of cool down a little bit.
We'll take a deep breath. Thank you, Mr. Burgess, as usual. We'll move on to item number 7, the Chief Scientific Officer report. The chair recognizes Dr. LeBeau to provide the academic research program update and introduce the Program Integration Committee's grant award recommendations.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I will refer you to tab 4 of your Oversight Committee meeting booklet for the academic research report.
We might need to adjust your microphone just a little
Okay.
bit. Thank you.
Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. If there are no questions, I will move ahead to our action items for today, which is the Scientific Review Council and Program Integration Committee FY22 Recruitment Award recommendations for recruitment cycles FY 22.7, 22.8, and 22.9, and a second action item of the FY 23.1 request for recruitment applications. So we'll begin with item number 1, which is a summary of the Program Integration Committee recommendations. And I'll refer you to the slide and to page 4 of your proposed grant award document. The PIC recommendations for 17 recruitment awards totaling $47.9 million are displayed in Table 1, and they're summarized in your report. The SRC had originally recommended 19 awards from FY22 recruitment cycles, totaling $57.9 million. However, the SRC recommendations exceeded the funds budgeted to fund academic research program awards for the third quarter of FY22. Therefore, the PIC deferred action on 2 awards, one established investigator and one rising star application totaling $10 million. And so we are putting forward a slate of 17 PIC recommendations to you today. The priorities addressed among these 17 awards are shown here in Table 2, which is also on page 5 of your booklet. And you'll see that all 17, of course, address the recruitment of outstanding cancer researchers to Texas. 2 address the priority of childhood and adolescent cancers, 3, access to innovative clinical trials, and 6, drug discovery, and 2, population disparities. Another way to think about this is that 4 of these individuals are chemists, and that really reflects the goal of several of our large academic medical centers and cancer centers to build their drug discovery program. And they're making significant investments in these programs. 4 of them represent translational cancer researchers, which is also a high priority among institutions conducting cancer research. So we'll begin with the Established Investigator Award, which is 2 are shown on this slide. The first is Dr. Pavan Reddy, who is being proposed by Baylor College of Medicine. Dr. Reddy is a physician scientist and translational researcher who's a leader in the field of stem cell transplantation. And he has focused his career on improving outcomes following stem cell transplantation and understanding the role of immune cells and their targets. He is being recruited to a leadership role at Baylor to serve as the new director of the Dan L. Duncan Comprehensive Cancer Center and also as a dean for oncology at Baylor. And he's bringing a new vision to this institution to expand cancer immunology, precision medicine, and clinical research. He will focus his work specifically on studying the GI complications of graft versus host disease in stem cell transplantation, which is a major cause of transplant-related mortality. If you don't mind, I'll keep moving ahead unless you stop me with questions. The next nominee is Dr. Michael Taylor, who is also being proposed by Baylor College of Medicine. And he is a pediatric neurosurgeon and molecular biologist who has made significant contributions to our understanding of the molecular biology underlying childhood brain tumors, and particularly ependymoma and medulloblastoma. And it's his work that led to a new molecular classification for these tumors by the World Health Organization. He will continue this work of using multi-omic approaches to study brain tumors and use this information to develop novel therapies and serve as the director of pediatric neuro-oncology research at Texas Children's Hospital. That completes our established investigator slate. Moving to the Rising Star Awards. The first is Dr. Hans Renata, who is being proposed by Rice University. Dr. Renata is an organic chemist, and he has created a new paradigm in chemistry called the total synthesis of bioactive natural products, meaning that natural products can be totally synthesized in the laboratory instead of having to rely on scarce resources in nature. And he will integrate synthetic organic chemistry and enzymatic reactions to synthesize and optimize bioactive material products that have anti-cancer activity. This next is Dr. Christine Lovely, who is a medical oncologist and actually has quite a renowned reputation in translational research in non-small cell lung cancer, with expertise in developing molecularly targeted therapies based on molecular profiling. She is being recruited to MD Anderson Cancer Center to lead the thoracic oncology program, and she will now turn her attention to small cell lung cancer and to use molecular profiling to develop targeted therapies. And the reason for this is that small cell lung cancer is associated still with a very poor prognosis because of incomplete response to initial therapy and acquired resistance. The third candidate is Dr. Kulung, or Ken Su, who is being recruited to the University of Texas at Austin. And he is a chemical biologist who combines multiple disciplines in chemistry to accelerate drug discovery. And he is proposing to focus on a cellular structure called RNP complexes. And these are complexes that concentrate proteins that regulate messenger RNA translation to proteins. And he is proposing to modulate the function of these complexes, specifically to modulate expression of those proteins that mediate the cell's response to stress, including chemotherapy. The idea being that if you modulate this, you can increase the response to cytotoxic therapy. The fourth candidate is Dr. Abdel Karim Azab, who's being recruited to the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. And he's a really interesting candidate who has a dual training as a bioengineer and a pharmacist. And he integrates technological innovations and actually creates technological innovations in nanotechnology and biomaterials to develop new cancer drugs. And he's working on a very innovative idea in cancer immunology. He is interested in targeting new proteins that are expressed on the non-malignant cells in the tumor environment. And these specifically proteins that are induced by the tumor cells adjacent to the non-malignant cells and who alter the function of the non-malignant cells and help them to support the growth of the tumor. So that completes the slate of Rising Star Awards. So moving to the slate for first-time tenure-track faculty. The first nominee is Dr. Lindy Miles, who's being proposed by the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. And she has expertise in using multi-omics, particularly genomic approaches, to define the clonal architecture in acute myeloid leukemia. And in particular, she has defined patterns or combinations of mutations that work together to synergize and cooperate to induce leukemogenesis and drug resistance. And she will use this information to define therapeutic vulnerabilities. The next candidate is Dr. Elizabeth Wasmuth, being proposed by UT Health at San Antonio. And she is working in prostate cancer, specifically in understanding the function of the androgen receptor, particularly the mechanism by which mutations in oncogenes alter the function of the androgen receptor in prostate cancer and cause deregulated growth. And she is, I just mentioned one point, that she is the recipient of a very prestigious award called the NIH Mosaic Pathway to Independence K99 Award, which is designed to increase diversity of underrepresented groups in STEM. The next candidate is Dr. William Hudson, being recruited to Baylor College of Medicine. And he is a cancer immunologist who defines the mechanism that drives immune cell, particularly CD8 positive T cell exhaustion in tumors. And his goal is to develop novel strategies to overcome this exhaustion so that he can advance the effectiveness of immunotherapy in breast cancer. The next candidate is Dr. Nicholas Riley, who is a chemist focused on modifying proteins expressed on tumor cells, and specifically proteins that facilitate their recognition by an elimination by immune cells. And in particular, he focuses on glycosylation, which is the covalent attachment of a carbohydrate to proteins, and that affects their stability and function. And he is, importantly, he is focusing on hepatocellular carcinoma. The next candidate is Dr. Arya Vashnavi, being proposed by the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center. And she studies lung and pancreatic cancer mouse modeling to develop rational targeted therapies. And Dr. Vashnavi is notable because she is continuing the work that she conducted during her postdoctoral fellowship, and this work on lung cancer actually was published in Nature Medicine and led to FDA approval for 2 new investigational drugs, and that are now in clinical trials. And she will focus on tumors that have mutations in the BRAF gene, but instead of the common mutation, she will focus on the rare mutations. And this is a group of patients for which there are currently no targeted therapies. Okay. The next is Dr. Mingji Dai, being recruited to Rice University. Dr. Dai is a bioengineer, and he uses microfluidic approaches and profiles cells at the single cell level. And in particularly, he profiles the proteomic profile, the protein profile of cells. And he uses this profile to understand the processes of metastasis and drug resistance. The next candidate is Dr. Jonathan Klinger, being recruited to Baylor University. Dr. Klinger is a crystallographer or structural biologist. He is a chemist also. He focuses on using structure of proteins and computationally aided methods to inform the development of drugs. And he has developed several unique technologies that actually allow him to freeze proteins in motion so that he can actually study various proteins at various structures that they adopt as they function along different signaling pathways. So it's a really important step in drug development. The next is Dr. Jason Schenkel, being recruited to University of Texas MD Anderson. And he is a physician scientist and immunologist studying the role of CD8 positive T cells in the anti-tumor response, and particularly focusing on the role of these cells in metastasis. And his goal is to improve immunotherapy approaches. The next is Dr. Samantha Rugas, being recruited to Rice University. She is an organic chemist who develops sustainable high-impact catalysis and synthesis methods, and she uses these methods to increase the diversity of available pharmaceuticals in large chemical libraries for screening and to identify new compounds. But she is turning her attention to studying and developing radiolabeled drug candidates, and in particular to using less utilized and isotopes. And the purpose is for therapy and imaging. The next candidate is Dr. Deepshika Ramanan, being recruited to MD Anderson Cancer Center. And she is an immunologist, and she has made a very interesting observation in laboratory animals. And that is that mothers can transfer immune modulating factors in breast milk to their offspring, which then establishes the immune profile in the GI system and the mammary gland, and that this can be inherited and passed on for multiple generations. And so she is interested in studying this bidirectional communication between the intestine, which is mediated by the microbiome in the intestine, and the mammary gland. And, of course, establishing whether this is a valid model in humans as well. And the purpose is that by tweaking the immune landscape, this may have approaches to prevention of colorectal cancer and other cancers long term. The last candidate is Dr. Chen Zhu, being recruited to Baylor College of Medicine. And he is a computational biologist who is credited with pioneering several new computational algorithms to merge and analyze genomic data. And he is interested in studying spatial transcriptomic signatures in triple-negative breast cancer to define tumor heterogeneity and response. And for those of you who don't know what spatial transcriptomic signatures are, it's studying individual cells and the population of cells that are next to each other in the tumor and understanding kind of the whole tumor environment. So that concludes our slate of candidates. I would be happy to address any questions you might have.
Members, any questions
I
for
have a
Dr.
question.
LaBelle? Mr. Margot?
I was just noticing that your highest merit rating is a 1.0, and it seemed to me we had more 1.0s than I remember seeing in the past. And I was just curious, have things changed in the process of the evaluation, or are we attracting better candidates because of the establishment of CPRIT over so many years?
I think it's more the latter, and I think it is both CPRIT's reputation, but there's a second factor, which is that recruitment was paused during 2020 by institutions, and it resumed in mid to late 2021. So we have seen an increase this year. And you are correct. The SRC, as they were reviewing these applicants, kept commenting on what a stellar group of applicants it was.
Very good. Any other questions?
In line with Mr. Margot's comments, I'm very pleased that that these grants are being spread across, lots of institutions, Baylor and Rice and other institutions, San Antonio. It's terrific. It's really a marvelous slate.
Dr. Rice?
I just have one question, and I'm just looking for your general impression, just because one of these hit me. The next to last one that has my word would be sort of studying that non-genetic impact of something that drives phenotype, or how they find that this thing expresses. Is that do you think, a growing area of sort of discovery in cancer research?
Dr. Rice is referring to, yes, I do think you're correct. I think there is a growing area of what is referred to as non-genetic impacts on phenotype in cancer, and these can be. This is a whole topic for a long conversation, but there are many factors that can affect that, and in a way, what you may be alluding to the fact that this is a new area, an exciting area, and in some ways proposals like this may be high impact, high risk, because they may or may not occur in humans, and we'll find out.
Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Burgess has certified compliance for the recruitment award process. It is my understanding that no Oversight Committee member has reported a conflict with any award recommendations presented today. Are there conflicts of interest that members have not already reported? Members, you have the list of applications and grant amounts recommended by the PIC for academic research grant awards. We will approve the PIC's recommendation if 2/3 of the Oversight Committee members agree. There are 3 award slates constituting 17 grant recommendations. Rather than taking a separate vote on each grant mechanism, I will ask for a vote to approve all of the slates.
So moved. Second.
If a member wants to consider one or more award recommendations separately from the vote on all the slates, please make a motion to do so now. I will now entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendations for the following mechanisms: recruitment of first-time tenure-track faculty members, recruitment of rising stars, and recruitment of established investigators.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing approval from at least 2/3 of the members, the motion carries. I will now entertain a motion delegating contract negotiation authority to the CEO and CPRIT staff to authorize the CEO to sign the contracts on behalf of CPRIT.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Dr. LeBeau, if you could now present the proposed fiscal year 2023 RFAs.
Would you go to the next slide? So on the last slide, and also in your, thank you, and also in your booklet is the proposed recruitment RFAs. And we are proposing the following scholar RFAs: the established investigators, the rising stars, and the first-time tenure-track faculty members. These RFAs are renewed annually. They have not been changed from our usual recruitment RFAs.
Members, any questions? Closing out our action items for the academic research program, I will entertain a motion approving the proposed FY 2023 RFAs presented by Dr. LeBeau.
So moved.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you, Dr. LeBeau, for excellent presentation. I will move to item number 8. The chair recognizes Mrs. Magid to provide the Chief Prevention Officer's report.
Good morning, members. My brief report is behind tab 5 of your meeting book. And we're in the process of one review cycle and a new one just opened. So I will present the PICS recommendations to you at the August meeting, and they're listed, the applications that we received are listed there by the 3 mechanisms. We did just release 3 RFAs, and these include the new RFAs, the primary prevention and the cancer screening and detection RFAs, as well as the dissemination RFA. I will be conducting a webinar because of the new RFAs, and there's always lots of questions coming up on June 1st for potential applicants. And that is my report. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you for your brevity. All right. Any questions for Mrs. Magid? Dr.
No,
Montgomery.
Mr. Yeah, well, it
Yes.
could be doctor, but yeah. So, Ms. Magid, I know the prevention community suffered a great slowdown with the pandemic. Is it recovering?
It is recovering slowly. Some grantees have reported being back to their pre-pandemic levels, in fact, at higher levels. But there's still some programs that, for instance, in the dental schools, they were doing a tobacco cessation program, and the people are just reluctant to come to the dentist. And so they've got combined 2 topics, coming to the dentist, and then nobody wants to talk about tobacco cessation, especially from your dentist. So, but they're doing all they can to get the numbers back up. American Cancer Society and CPRIT are talking about having a joint forum, a seminar on Get Screened. So getting people back to screening, bringing together the CPRIT grantees and then some of the federally qualified health centers and other community clinics, as well as the academic communities, to see what we can do in Texas to bring the numbers back up.
Great. Mr. Margo.
We talked about the cessation of the testing and the impact it would have on healthcare, and ultimately, in effect, how many surgeries had to occur because of the failure to do the normal testing and prevention ahead of time. Mm-hmm. Do we have any data at all to talk about what the COVID pandemic did in that and what the results were? I mean, is there any way to gather any of that data?
We do not have the data yet. Dr. Cummings, do you have?
I mean, it's still all anecdotal. I mean, we're
Yes.
still in the middle of it.
Yeah. And we won't have for,
I don't know if that's something for
a year or
hospitals
two.
to determine, or what. I just wonder what the impact was or
It's
is.
significant. Dr. Rice.
I was going to ask a similar question in that I wondered, not only that question, but I wonder if what RFAs we have which might invite that kind of study. It's not a typical academic, maybe, I'm not sure, but I wondered what structure we have if there was an RFA that would study that.
That's sort of in the, it's not a prevention RFA because it's not an evidence-based program. it would involve someone, it is research. It is dissemination and implementation science research and health services research, so that would fall under the academic research
Yes.
program.
Maybe just asking the questions when they're doing the screening and, and those that get referred to a physician for further care or surgery or whatever, is there a way to track that data?
We will, what they're saying is that the number of later stage cancers will happen.
Right.
We will see that, but not for many months till, they actually go back into the office, get screened, get diagnosed, get treated, and then they will report out. But I think nationally, I'm reluctant to say when we would have that data, but it's at least a year or more. And the grantees do ask that question. They are calling back anybody that has been screened in the CPRIT projects before and trying to encourage them to come back. But it's still difficult. People are just reluctant to get back on the screening wagon. Dr. Hernandez, do you have any experience with this?
I don't. I wish great question and commentary, but I do not have that experience.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Magid.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to item number 9.
Go sit down.
While we transition to the next item, Dr. Rosenfeld, let me address the Bird Foundation grants that you mentioned. We're going to attribute this to jet lag. Will you let me use that as an excuse? We did have some discussion with them, with the head of the that we mentioned, the Israeli Innovation Authority, and this is something that they are interested in facilitating discussions with us, so we can go into it more at a later date, but it does look like there's some opportunities there.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. We'll now recognize our new Interim Chief Product Development Officer, Dr. Ken Smith. Dr. Smith, will you provide the Product Development Program update and introduce the FY 2023 Product Development RFAs? We're at tab 6.
Thank you. Kristen will go through the RFAs.
You want to give your program update? Just
Can we do that first?
go ahead first.
Okay,
That's quick.
so just the program update, the cycle. The cycle we're in right now is 2022. And as you can see, I don't know if it's up on the board, but in your book, there were 34 companies that applications we received. And from that, we got 15 to present, and there are still now 11 in due diligence. And the due diligence, the IP due diligence, and the regular due diligence is ongoing. The reports are due, I think, June 6th, and then there'll be a meeting, 2 separate meetings, actually, one for seeds and one for Relco, Texco, or company awards, on July 13th and 14th.
I'm not going to say it's possible what we're going to expect.
Oh, okay. So in the process of it, we've never had 11 due diligence requests before. And so the total amount of the funds requested now is 98 million, and the product development cycle is 70 million, and we've already awarded 6 million. So if every company were approved, we'd actually exceed the budget and may have to push some of this into the next fiscal year. Mm-hmm. We'll see. One comment I just wanted to make on it was that, again, just like the scientific part of this, the companies were quite good this time around. And so that's why so many have moved forward, and potentially could be more than the normal 9% that get through the process. So again, quite a few applications and quite a few going to move to due diligence.
Very good. Any questions?
I have a question.
Dr. Hernandez?
So what happens? There you go. As previous presentation and now this one, what happens to those people that get go through the system, they get graded, and they wind up being chosen, but there's enough revenue or funds for it? Next cycle, do they then move up and they're at the top of the list for the next cycle, or do they have to restart all over again, or how does that work?
I can answer this, but Kristen's chomping at the bit, so I'll let her deal with it.
Thank you.
She's excited because she's down at the table.
Ms. Doyle, would you like to enlighten us, please?
So in our statute, any final recommendation, and final recommendation is termed as coming from the peer review committee. So any final recommendation made in the fiscal year has to be acted on in that fiscal year. So with academic research, with product development, it may be the case where so let's say with product development, if 8 of the companies are going to go through, and it looks like that will be more than the amount that we have left in grant funds, they will not make a final recommendation on some of the companies. And so those companies will carry into the fiscal year 2023. And we may have a special meeting. We've done this in the past. We've had to carry over some awards into the next fiscal year. And so we may have a special meeting of the Oversight Committee, in September or early October, so that we can approve those awards where the final recommendations are made in fiscal year 2023. I think that is also going to happen with academic research. So it is a good problem to have. We have, a lot of applications, much more than what we can fund, but it's also a concern because then it eats into fiscal year 2023 funds. So.
Thank you for that question. All right, Ms. Doyle, would you like to
That's exactly
give us the program development project update?
Yes. So, and this is what Wayne previewed for you in his CEO report. We've been working for months, but in November, it really crystallized our mission. We have been meeting a core group of us, and so that is Ken and Tracy, Wayne, Michelle, Ramona Magid has also been part of this. Heidi has been part of this. Cindy Walker-Peach, when she was here. We would meet every week to talk about ideas in terms of, our main goal is how do we fund more companies? And, obviously, we need more applications in. You can do 2 different things. We can lower our standards, or we can do better in terms of getting high-quality applicants that successfully navigate the process. Obviously, we dismissed the lower our standards pretty quickly. Like we've just had in this discussion, we have far more potential awards than we have money for. So there's no room for giving a subpar award. And so then the focus really is how do we get high quality applicants? How do we attract more people to apply to CPRIT? Again, another obvious answer on that is outreach, and certainly you've heard some of the fruits of those activities, from the Texas-Israeli trip. Ken and Tracy are also going to be going to the Bio Conference, which is once again an in-person. Lots of meetings will come from that, and a lot of outreach. But we looked at the message that we're giving. It's not only going out and meeting with these people, but it's also talking about why they want to apply to CPRIT. So if you look right now at what CPRIT's doing in product development, it takes about 7 months from the time you submit your application to the time that the Oversight Committee makes a final decision. The application that is submitted is 80 to 100 pages. It's pretty extensive. And once that application is submitted, about less than half, so about 40% of the companies that submit that extensive application are invited to do an in-person presentation. So more than half of the companies that go to all of that work, aren't making the cut. From our review committee's perspective, our review committees are investing a lot of their time and energy to look through all of the applications, make extensive scoring and comments. The applicants have, expended a whole lot of work in putting together those applications. And then, so 40% make it to the in-person presentations, about 10% get awards. So they're facing pretty daunting odds with a long lead time to hear about it. So, that was one of the charges that the committee was looking at, was how can we, keep our high standard of review, our rigorous review, but cut down that time. And so, the biggest change that we have put in place is a preliminary application process. So companies who are interested in applying can submit a preliminary application at any time. That preliminary application is 2-page executive summary. It's a 16-page slide deck. And many of these companies, if they're asking for money, whether it's from us or other sources, should already have a slide deck together that talks about their science and talks about their program. And so, and then with that 1 page where they talk about the aims of the project and what they propose their budget to be. Our review council will receive those applications. They can be submitted at any time. The review council will meet, they'll review them, and they'll decide who will be invited to in-person presentations. Once you're invited to once you are invited to submit a full application, all of those full applications will go to in-person presentations. But the companies can decide which in-person presentation date, works well with their schedule. And those are then tied to Oversight Committee dates. So the schedules are all put out in advance. They hear back on that preliminary review within 3 to 5 weeks. So they get a pretty quick response on whether or not they're going to be aligning with our portfolio. Our reviewers are thrilled with this because it is cutting out a lot, and they've said it. They've said, I can look at this, in the full application, you're also submitting a slide deck, you're submitting an executive summary. They can say, I can look at that slide deck and know this company's not making through. They're either not ready, or, sometimes you have companies who think, oh, it's a grant. And so treat it, with less rigor than they would when they are applying for real money. And that doesn't work for us. So this way we can knock them out early, focus the review panel's attention, on applications that really can make it all the way through. So that's the big change, is the preliminary review. That, and once you submit a full application, then you go to the in-person presentation. There's still due diligence review. We have cut out a whole lot of time, the gaps, in the timing of the reviews. So ultimately, now we've shaved about 100 days off of our current review cycle. So instead of 7 months, it's about 3.5 months from submitting a full application to an Oversight Committee approval. Other things that we have done from a process perspective, we have looked at the reviewers that we have, and we've looked at the portfolio that CPRIT, you guys know, we fund the best of the best, whatever that is. But, and Ken will talk about this more, both Dr. Smith and Dr. McGee, have taken on a big task of assessing all of the reviewers that we have for product development and identifying if there are gaps in expertise. So if we can beef up our reviewers in devices diagnostics, and particularly in new technologies, we want to be ready, and we want the message to go out that CPRIT's the place. If you've got an artificial intelligence application, we're ready to review that, and we've got the right reviewers who can say, this is an early stage company that we should be funding. So with that, and this is more of a labeling perspective, but it helps us from a marketing take, is instead of having, like what we have right now, we have Texas company, we have relocation company, and we have seed. We're going to keep the seeds. That's important. But instead of having a relocation company and a Texas company, which are essentially the same. There's nothing different in relocation other than we call it relocation. Every single company that we fund are required to certify and then compliance checks annually in terms of whether they are fulfilling their Texas business criteria during the time that they are receiving money from us and for 3 years after they've received funds from us. So, this does, and I've always joked a little bit, a relocation RFA is a misnomer because none of our money can be used to relocate the company here. You have to be in Texas to get that money. So what we're doing instead is we are going to have a therapeutics RFA, a device RFA, a diagnostics RFA, and a new technologies RFA. So, any of those could have applied to our Texas company or relocation company RFAs for the fiscal year 2022 cycle that we're in. But by specifically having these named, we can be going to, device conferences and say CPRIT wants to fund exciting, innovative treatments. Now, another thing that we have worked on, and Dr. Smith has done the work with the Product Development Review Council, is really specifying what we expect to see from the companies in terms of the substance. And I'll turn that over to you.
One thing to address is that there are going to be 5 RFAs now. And so by doing that, we were heavily weighted on the therapeutic side. And that's partly because that's seems to be most of our expertise is on the therapeutic side. So we want to have diagnostics and devices, as well as, and Kristen said, I call it new and emergent technologies. And so that has a large umbrella. It also helps the reviewers too, because questions you get during some of the review process is whether this really falls into CPRIT's domain. Does it fall into CPRIT's mission? And having all these new RFAs that describe kind of what the mission is and what is expected of these companies makes the reviewers more comfortable that, yes, they belong here, we can fund them. And it was kind of very narrow before, it seems to me, kind of more really focused on the therapeutics. And so now we've got ways to get in all kinds of different things that may be a little bit tangential to actual cancer treatments, but are also important, like sample preparation, manufacture of radionuclides has gotten to be a big topic. And so all of these things we're hoping to encapsulate in those 5 RFAs. And having the seed separate, too, I think is a big deal, because I think the temptation was, from the reviewer's point of view, is that these are really too early. Well, that's exactly what we want. I mean, we don't want them to be just, in the laboratory, but these are very, very early. And so maybe you don't have the target fully defined. Maybe you don't have the particular molecule defined, but you at least have an understanding of where you want to go with it. And again, these will be still the $3 million limit. And so I think that'll help other companies to apply, and not only that, to have the reviewers actually comfortable with moving some of those companies to grant. And in that process, what we're trying to do with reviewers, we went through the reviewers, and we have about 60 reviewers that we've used periodically, all the way from people that have only been there 1 year to people that have been with CPRIT for 12 years. And it must be 50% of the expertise. And some of these people have multiple expertise, but the primary expertise is in the therapeutic area. And then the other type of expertise, it kind of falls in the product kind of development, people who have been in pharma and have actually brought products to market. But we have a paucity of AI or biomarker expertise. Even with devices, we only have a handful of people that know the 510K or the PMA process. And diagnostics the same way. So we're kind of trying to dovetail these RFAs to help both the applicants as well as the reviewers to be able to move some of these things further along to get a higher percentage actually approved at the end of the day. Not, again, as Kristen said, we don't want to have just anybody approved. We still want to keep the quality high. But I think it frees the reviewers up to kind of feel like, how can we get this company funded, rather than how can we not get this company funded?
I'll just add a couple more points. One thing that is new is we have a requirement now to submit our RFAs if we have a request for applications that exceeds $5 million and will go to a for-profit entity, then a statewide group that is called the committee, or the contract advisory committee, or a contract advisory, it's T. Contracted advisory team will review our requests for applications. So we have to submit those to them before we can release them. And that review can take 30 days, possibly more. We have been releasing requests for applications for more than 12 years, including, commercialization and product development requests for applications. So I'm hopeful that this will be a fast and easy review. And I should add, not only that, but we just went through a state audit that examined all of our grant review process and our grant management process, from RFAs to ending the contracts. So we have had extensive external review. We've had a lot of success with how we have put our process in place. So I'm hopeful that CAT review will be quick and efficient, but that will be a new step for us. The other thing that I want to put on your plates, just looking ahead, as another part of what we are looking at in terms of increasing the number of high-quality companies in Texas, is a bridge RFA. We have talked about this, I think, a couple times with the Oversight Committee over the past couple years, and we really want to get this out and get it going, because this is something where we can help all of the regions of Texas. Obviously right now we have a lot of companies that develop around Houston and Dallas, and then, San Antonio and Austin, but there is work being done across the state. And so we want the regions to be responding to this RFA, with their community resources, how they can be leveraging their unique, resources, talents. I'm always struck, the very last trip that Wayne and I took the day before we shut down all travel and shut down the office was to El Paso. And, that's how long we've been looking at this. We were looking at, what could this be like in other places? And it was amazing. El Paso invited a lot of the military team that they had working and talked with us about special capabilities, that El Paso could leverage, that maybe would help them start new companies and support new companies that then would be able to apply to CPRIT for seed funding, and ultimately, hopefully, product development funding. So we're putting together that RFA. We're receiving a lot of input. Obviously we've talked, you'll hear from both the Product Development Advisory Committee today and the Geographic Diversity Advisory Committee. We've talked with both of those committees about the Bridge RFA, and we're seeking a lot of input from stakeholders. What we want is every region in Texas to see themselves in this RFA and really work together as a community to put together something where CPRIT's money can be transformation. And what that means for Houston and Dallas and San Antonio and Austin is we don't want to just displace somebody else's. They have done a lot of work in those areas, and so we're going to be expecting really innovative suggestions where we're filling the gaps there. So it will be interesting and exciting, and hopefully we'll have that for you at the summer meeting, the June 20th meeting.
Well, this is great, a great update, and just like to applaud your team and the whole effort that has gone in the past 6 months to identify an opportunity, and this is just really exciting. I think we're going to see great benefit from this, and this is perfect timing with the challenges corporate-wise and economic-wise across the nation. You know, our money is going to be sought after. People are going to want it. They don't have other options right now, so we're hoping we're going to get some really good requests and proposals. So thank you very much for your work. Any other questions? Is that a real question? We'll start with Dr. Rosenfeld.
Thank you. Congratulations, Kristen, CPRIT, and the team. That's very exciting. You talked about improvement of the internal processes. But I was listening to see if there's anything about reaching out externally. And I may have missed it, but I didn't hear it. And my question is do you plan to establish either regional meetings, say like in Cambridge or San Francisco, so those folks could hear about CPRIT? And that's one question. And the other is attending national meetings to put up the CPRIT flags, AACR, American Society of Hematology, American Society of Clinical Oncology. Are there any external processes planned as part of this innovation?
Do you want to take this?
Oh, you don't.
I would answer
You're
it,
not.
I think Wayne
You're not
wants it.
chomping.
Wayne's chomping at the bit to answer.
Yes, Dr. Rosenfeld. The problem we've encountered with some of those conferences is it's one thing to mill around in the crowd, introduce ourselves, give out our business cards. It's another thing to get 20 to 30-minute presentation in front of a larger audience, and that is what we have been unsuccessful in getting. If you, any of the other members of the Oversight Committee, or anyone watching this webcast or reading these minutes, I'm sure there's lots of people read our minutes, who can arrange opportunities for us to do that. I mentioned earlier in the Texas-Israeli trip that I'm hoping we can go back and speak to a target-rich group of individuals where we can really tout and explain the benefits of Texas and CPRIT. I think that would be extremely beneficial to this. I would be remiss in not pointing out that next month, Dr. Smith and Ms. Davies are going out to Bio in San Diego, and they are arranging, because Bio is a little bit different, where they in advance can arrange one-on-one meetings. And that was frankly pretty successful the last time we could do it. Dr. Cindy Walker Peach was quite successful in getting some applications. So, pointing out as Dr. Cummings just did, and some of the information we're aware of, and I think that it will be discussed later with the advisory committee report, is some of the venture money is drying up or just not as available. So I think there's going to be a lot more interest in the program. I hope that answered your question. But if you can get us in front of those groups, I sure would appreciate it. We'll go.
Well, thank you. I'll work with you.
We'll go.
But the other one I mentioned is regional CPRIT meetings, not just national professional society meetings.
And we are I think Ms. McConnell will discuss hopefully the upcoming annual meeting that is going to be next year. But we do have some smaller, the word's not jumping at me, but meetings. I think we're going to try and have one here in Austin related to academic research. We're going to go to Pegasus Park in Dallas again at the end of July, if I remember correctly, again for the Childhood and Adolescent Researchers Roundup. And Ramona, Ms. Magid mentioned the possibility of a joint conference with the American Cancer Society and CPRIT in that arena. And we've discussed something similar for product development, but right now, we're taking a big gulp on the changes to the program and need to get this done. But yes, I would like to do it, and I think we've got some in the works. I don't think they're exactly what you have in mind, but willing to move there. And hopefully we're going to be able to begin planning the details of the biennial conference soon.
And let me add one thing. I did not mean to leave the impression that the work that we've been doing since November is over. We will continue, now that we've addressed this part of the message, now we're talking about the channels of how to get that message out. And so we will be coming back to the Oversight Committee, in terms of, ways that new ways that CPRIT's doing it, but also, I have two things that I'll ask for. Again, I'll reiterate Wayne's ask, if there are people in your networks or meetings that you think CPRIT would be a great presentation, even if they're not companies, even if they're not investors, if they can hear us and hear that that's what CPRIT's doing, if they learn about us and learn that that's part of our mission, that may be another connection that can be made. So, think about that in terms of your network and where CPRIT can fit in terms of presentations. The second point is, we've made this request to our stakeholders also, as we are extending our bench for product development reviewers, provide us people in your network that you think may be great reviewers for us. They should be out of state. All of our reviewers are out of state. We need experts not only in the science, and science still drives all of the product development decisions, but ones that are experienced in those industries. I mean, Ken was talking about, we need reviewers who have done the 510. I don't know if I'm going to be saying it right. I'll leave that to you. But, we need those people. So think about your Rolodex, and if there are people out there, send them to us, and we can get them hooked in.
Thank you.
Mr. Montgomery.
A minute ago, I was doctor. What happened?
Yeah, you're downgraded.
Yeah, wow.
Plagiarized your dissertation.
How do you know that this will result in better applications, more applications? Do you have any evidence that even anecdotal, that we will advance the process and make better or more product development grants?
So I'll answer, and the others can chime in. I don't know that we know that yet. We will, at the end of this, have a more efficient process for the applicants that are making it through. We'll have reviewers that are not bogged down with applications that never should have made it through. But nevertheless, and I think you guys see this, you see the critiques that the reviewers write. They typically, those critiques can be 10 pages long and provide a lot of good information back to the companies. But that's a lot of work to be looking at each application, especially ones that are never going to make it further. So removing that, I think, will make it easier also for us to get more reviewers recruited. It will not be such a big ask as it is right now. And I think while we are doing, more targeted outreach, saying, send in your preliminary application, you'll hear back from us in 3 to 5 weeks. That's easy. And once you've done that and gotten some feedback, I think we will hear.
Was the delay the central problem that was identified?
Well, and I will say, you will be hearing from the Product Development Advisory Committee, so I'd ask,
Yeah,
I'd
I
ask
was
that
gonna
chair, yes.
suggest
So, you know, it's feedback that we've heard. You know, it takes a long time. It may not align with where, you know, their activities that they're doing, the fundraising activities that they're doing. You know, and so then they have to really make decisions on when they're applying.
The two elements to the proposal that resonate the most with me is the deep dive on the peer reviewer bench that we've got to make sure that we have the appropriate expertise in all of the emerging fields that we are seeing. The second element to it is the process is streamlined in that there has been a sort of a last review of applications by individuals that did not follow the application from the beginning to the end, that all of a sudden will raise ideas and objections that have not had the experience of fully discussing it at the various stages. And that step is being eliminated, and I think that's going to help too. Again, as Kristen pointed out, this is a really great question to ask of the advisory committee later in the meeting.
Right. My questions are all directed at how do we know, I mean, we know there's a problem. We're not getting as many of the quality that we want. How do we know we've correctly identified what the holdup has been, or the central problem that we're trying to fix? And I don't mean to be critical, because I think the work you all have done is terrific. I want to echo the chairman's or the vice chairman's comments that I think it's excellent work, and I think it will improve.
Mr. Margo.
I can see where they would think a lot of cases it's a grant and not an investment.
Yeah.
Are we clarifying that on the front end? I mean, especially the newbies, I can imagine that they would think it was more of a
Free money.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, CPRIT is only allowed to disperse money as grants. So we can't conceal the fact that it is a grant, but in the RFA, we do specify, and even now, we were joking internally, I have a blue box label on the second page of the RFA that says, you know, you need to be a Texas company. Don't apply to this RFA if you do not intend to be improving the life science ecosystem throughout Texas, be in Texas, you know, employ Texans, manufacture in Texas. You know, and we also in the RFA talk about the matching requirements, talk about the revenue sharing, talk about the contract that will be assigned. You know, we have a webinar. We'll do an outreach. You know, but you can't force people to understand that. But we will improve our message.
Yeah, and with respect to, we call them grants. They are grants, but there's nothing that prohibits any entity from establishing milestones. We other than the advance payments that we make to commercialization awards, it's a reimbursement process. And you will recall last session, a signature part of our budget request was to increase the number of grant accountants and compliance specialists that comb through those reimbursement requests. This is a significant difference between CPRIT's process and NIH/NCI. Mm-hmm. You'll recall that I characterized it to the committees and to you that NIH operates under we are working in partnership with our grantees, and it's a trust but not verify. I've never felt the Texas legislature would buy that philosophy, so we trust, but we verify to the extent we can. And that message resonated with the legislature, and as you know, they gave us our full request.
Yeah, so we're giving grants with potential revenue sharing with these. Does our statute need to be changed at all so it's more clarifying? Or
No.
do we think this accomplishes that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And just to be clear, every single research award that we make, so whether it's product development or academic research, includes a revenue sharing component. And, I don't mean to dramatically expand this discussion, but in the coming Oversight Committee meetings, you will hear the work that we are doing in terms of, on the academic research side, all of the CPRIT-funded technology, the patents, the license agreements, all of that, compiling that into a database, and then also how can we best leverage that. So all of that is tied with the revenue sharing. It is, we talked about CPRIT 2.0 after the reauthorization, and almost as soon as we started talking about that, COVID hit for 2 years. It hasn't stopped the work that we've been doing internally, but you will now start seeing the results, not just in product development, but in all of the programs in terms of what we can be doing differently based on, the 12 years of experience that we have now.
Thank you very much for that great update. We're going to move on to the approval of the fiscal year 2023 RFAs. Have we presented those? Those are the 5 that you mentioned. The Texas Therapeutic Company Award, the Texas Device Company Award, the Texas Diagnostic Company Award, the Texas Emerging Frontier Company Award, and the Texas Seed Company Award. Members, I will entertain a motion approving the proposed FY 2023 RFAs presented by Dr. Smith and Ms. Doyle.
So moved.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, members.
Move on to item 10, the internal auditor report. Next, we'll take up the internal auditor's report. The chair recognizes Mr. Graves to present his report. This is under tab 7.
Good morning.
Good morning.
With me, I have Robert Neal as well. He's the director of our CIO services. For our status report for you today, they're on page 7-1 of your packet. The IT General Computer Controls Remediation Assistance is all but complete. That project is what Robert led for us. As you recall, part of our plan was to help revise some of the policies, procedures, and get some internal controls implemented as part of remediation efforts of the fiscal 2021 IT General Computer Controls Audit. What we did through that is we took about 100 different pages of policies and procedures, reviewed and revised those, boiled it down into one document that's about 40 pages long. So Robert had a lot of reading and a lot of effort behind that, but what we feel is that through the revision of that policy packet is that we now have helped you start down the road of implementing some pretty solid controls and some standardized processes that are well communicated throughout the IT department and the agency. That packet and that final report has gone to the IT Governance Committee and subject to some maybe other minor revisions. The last thing that needs to be done is for the IT Governance Committee to accept it and that policy to be implemented through the agency. So that project is while the status says in progress, it's 98% complete. As part of that, also, we provided some templates to use so that some of the controls and policies that we've established, there's some formats and forms for the IT department to use to start executing those controls and to start having some demonstrable evidence of the activities that are taking place, as well as Robert helped design a statement of IT integrity that will be completed, I believe, twice a year, every 6 months, which is a way for the IT department to do a self-assessment of whether or not they're hitting their marks and to be able to provide that back to CPRIT management as well. So it's a sort of self-policing activity that is a good housekeeping habit that we've managed to help design for them. So that is on page 7-3 of your packet. You'll see a more detailed scope of what that coverage was. It covers all the major process domains and IT general control areas, as well as just provide you the prioritization of how we attacked that project, or how Robert and his team attacked that project. As far as moving on through the rest of our internal audit plan, we have 3 other audits on the plan: vendor contract compliance, records management, and procurement. Vendor contract compliance, we have started our internal planning, and we'll be working with CPRIT to execute that audit through this month and through June, possibly into July, as well as with procurement. Those will be executed, or that audit will be executed through May and June as well. The records management and grantee compliance records audit advisory engagement, we have, or that project we have canceled for this year. The reason for that is due to the change in the IT environment. That is all IT, and with the changes, what we're trying to do, and helping what the agency's trying to do in the IT, it's just best not to take that on this year, especially given some staffing changes, et cetera, that I know you're all aware of. And so that one we've canceled, and we'll look at it for the 2023 plan. We also have 4 different follow-ups to perform. All of those have a major IT component. Now that we have the IT assistance project largely behind us, we will be looking at, we have coordinated with Robert and his team to see, from what we've managed to do in that compliance project, to now come back and say, what have we addressed that of these open findings? And we will be looking at those, and we'll provide you those reports. We'll actually go through and do the testing and look at how well those are working. We've got to give them a little bit of time to get working and established in the agency, but with the tools and templates, we should be able to revise a good portion of these and bring that back to you at the next meeting to show you the progress that's been made. And also, in addition, we provided our tracking table on page 7-4, or item 7-4. There's no change in that since our last presentation, but as a matter of habit, we represent that to you every time. The final rest of our plan, as we do, we'll bring to you back in August a proposed fiscal 2023 internal audit plan that we'll coordinate with agency administration on, as well as an annual report. If we don't bring that one to you in the August meeting, we'll have that for you in the November meeting like we have in years past. It's usually due November 1st, and we usually don't get guidance on that from the SAO until early August, usually the first week or 2 of August, of what that needs to look like for the current fiscal year. So if we don't get it done in time for the August meeting, based on that guidance, we'll have it for you in the November meeting. With that, that's all the comments I have. We'll open for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Graves. Any questions from the members? Dr. Hernandez?
Well, thank you for revising all the policies. How are you guys going to monitor the fact that, because we don't want to know a year later, right, that you've done these great policies and a staffer decides not to follow a certain policy? When do you pick up on that, on this mechanism, this audit? How does it pick it up?
Well, the first mechanism is our follow-ups. So quite a bit of the follow-ups is the IT general computer controls follow-up, and these remainders all have those same IT elements. For the communications, governance, and disaster recovery, those all have similar elements. The other piece of that is that statement of IT integrity, that every 6 months.
It's every 6 months.
We'll be able to look at that every 6 months along with
Great,
Wayne and his team, and we'll be able to see that. As well as next year's internal audit plan, we'll likely have a really robust IT audit as part of that to make sure that those are working effectively.
Any other questions?
All right. Sorry, but Mr. Graves, on the status report sheet, the last page, page 7-4, at the very bottom, there's a note, 2020 disaster recovery and business continuity plan findings or recommendations for improvement. Therefore, they do not have a risk associated with them. Can you just explain that to me? I'm sorry, I don't quite follow that.
Yeah, yes, sir. No, that's not a problem. That engagement or that audit was performed under our advisory standards, so more of a consultative standard. And so we don't risk rate those. Those
Okay.
are all just opportunities for improvement. I will note that there's only a handful of those left open. Most of those have been addressed previously last year. So there's
Thank you.
5 left to update.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Graves. We're going to move on to item 11.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you both very much. The chair recognizes Mr. Roberts to present his appointments to the Scientific Research and Prevention Program committees.
As you know, this is a recurring item. I have appointed 2 experts to our peer review committees. Our statute requires you, the Oversight Committee, to approve these appointments. The appointees and their credentials are behind this tab 8. And at their May 5th meeting, the Board Governance Subcommittee reviewed the appointees and recommend approval to you. I request your approval.
Are there any questions for Mr. Roberts or the Board Governance Subcommittee? Hearing none. Is there a motion to approve Dr. Jaffe and Dr. Wang's appointment to the Scientific Research and Prevention Program committees?
So moved.
Second. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Members, we're going to move item 12 to later in our meeting this morning. We're going to move on to committee business with item 13. The chair recognizes Ms. Eckel to discuss the proposed administrative rule change. This is behind tab 10.
Happy birthday.
Yeah.
Is today your birthday?
No.
Oh, okay. We were going to sing. We ran a whole show here. Okay.
So moving on to the rules behind tab 10, we just have one proposed rule amendment for final adoption. No new rule changes, unfortunately. The proposed amendment for adoption was presented at the February meeting. It was to section 703.17 related to requiring equity, if CPRIT takes equity in a grantee, to specify any changes to grant reporting in the contract. We published it in the Texas Register, or rather the Secretary of State did. We did not get any public comments, so it's the same proposed for final adoption as in February.
Members, any questions? Is there a motion to approve the final order adopting the rule change to the Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 703?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. We'll turn to agenda item 14. The chair recognizes Ms. McConnell to present the Chief Operating Officer's report. This is tab 11.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So, yes, tab 11, I'll just highlight some items under my report. We do continue to receive revenue sharing payments. We received almost $32,000 in the second quarter of this fiscal year, and we also, and that included about $20,000 of royalty payments from Merck and Company from the sale of Wellereg. And we received notification from Merck in April that we were going to be receiving another royalty payment of about $27,550 for the first calendar quarter of 2022. To date, our total revenue sharing deposits are approximately $7.4 million. With respect to debt issuance, we haven't issued any additional debt since December, but we will be issuing our final quarter of debt this year in June. And so that will round out the $298.1 million that we would plan to issue this year. With respect to the strategic plan for fiscal years 2023 and 2027, we are finalizing that plan that is due to the Office of the Governor and the Legislative Budget Board by June 1st. And as I mentioned before, it is the beginning of the state budget cycle for the 2024-25 biennium. So we're still getting used to that. Finally, with respect to the 2022 conference update, it actually should be the 2023 conference update because we have received multiple bids from our RFP that closed on April 4th. Our purchaser, Don Brandy, is still finalizing all of the components of those bids, and internally we will begin reviewing those bids probably within the next week or so. And I can tell you that based on at least the bid proposals and the dates that have been proposed, our conference will be August 2023 or after. And this was a statewide RFP, so we received bids not only from Austin, but in other locations around the state. Are there any questions before I move
What
on?
were some of those other locations?
Fort Worth and Galveston.
All right. Any questions for Ms. McConnell on her report? Okay, let's move to item 15. Ms. McConnell, will you please explain CPRIT's 2024-2025 legislative appropriations request? This is on tab 12.
Yes, so actually, if you'll turn to 12-2, the chart that shows kind of appropriations, where we are right now in terms of the FY 2022 budgeted and then 2023 budgeted, the current biennium. What we propose to do for the 2024-25 biennium is carry through the FY 23 budget, which will start obviously September 1st of this year, and just carry that over into both years of 24 and 25. With respect to the administration, which falls under A13, the grant review and award operations, and then B11, indirect administration, the total of both those line items is approximately $21 million, or 7% of the budget. You'll also note at the bottom there's the Rider 5 transfer to State Health Services for the Cancer Registry, which is a little over $3.1 million that we are mandated to transfer every year. At this point, I don't anticipate that changing. We have not received any notice from State Health Services about that, so that is carried through 24 and 25. In addition to the kind of the numbers in the budget request, one of the items that we would also like to include in the administrator statement that comes from Wayne is a request that if there is an across-the-board pay increase for state employees, that same pay increase is applied to the two exempt positions that we have, which are the Chief Executive Officer and the Chief Scientific Officer. Those are specifically listed out in the General Appropriations Act and have to have separate authority. They don't just get any across-the-board increases. So we would just be making that request. It wouldn't necessarily require any additional budget, but just that request. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Ms. McConnell or the Audit Subcommittee? All right. Do I have a motion to approve CPRIT's fiscal year 2024-2025 legislative appropriations request?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Move on to item 16. Ms. McConnell, please explain the recommended contract approvals.
Yes. So there are two. One is the first one is for outside counsel contract for actually FY 2022, an increase to the contract for Baker and Botts, which we originally have a contract for $40,000 and increasing that by $85,000 to $125,000. So that now brings it because of the $100,000 major contract threshold requires Oversight Committee approval. The other contract that would also increase would be the Norton Rose Fulbright contract, but that total budget would go from $40,000 to $95,000 and does not necessarily require your approval. The reason for the increases in both of these contracts is to address the issue that Dr. Smith explained earlier, that now there are 11 companies going through due diligence. Originally, in his role as the Chief Due Diligence and Patent Officer, he would be able to complete a lot of that and then, assign to either of the outside counsel firms additional, responsibilities for some of those, depending on the numbers and any conflicts that may have existed. But now in his interim role as the Chief Product Development Officer and his participation on the PIC, he should not be also doing the due diligence reviews. So that's the reason for increasing both of these contracts, and then obviously needing the approval for the Baker & Botts contract increase since it exceeds $100,000. Are there any questions?
Do the outside counsel mostly focus on patent reviews, or what's their major efforts?
I'll let Kristen address that.
Well, and it may be good to have Ken come up since he's been doing IP due diligence reviews for more than a decade. But it focuses on their patent estate, but also looks at the license agreements that they've made and examines, for any red flags. CPRIT never wants to be the last money into a company, so we want to identify early if there is a problem that can't be fixed. Then we won't put money in. Most of the time, what we're finding with these early stage companies are they need to do a better job in terms of renegotiating a license or putting some agreements in place. So we'll have those as contract contingencies that they have to finish beforehand. But that all comes from IP due diligence.
Thank you.
The second contract is the FY 2023 Grant Management Support Services contract with Gdit, and that would be for a not-to-exceed amount of $9.9 million. That amount includes an annual payment of $1.1 million as a subscription for the grant management platform that provides the application receipt, peer review evaluation, and post-award grant contract management systems that we use. And then the remaining a little more than $8.8 million is an estimate of the time and materials that'll be required for the Gdit labor and direct costs for peer review meetings to cover, RFA issuance and the peer review meetings, and then all of the support in terms of enhancements to the peer review and the grant management support modules. And those enhancements will include some additional redesign and restructuring with respect to the product development redesign that you just heard presented earlier, as well as an improvement to the prevention quarterly progress reports. That will be not only redesigning those reports, but restructuring the report database. There's quite a bit of data in there, and apparently the amount of data, it's now taking a significant time to actually run those reports, and so it requires redesigning it, and then migrating the report to, that particular report to a new report formatting technology that we already have in use on many of our other reports that come out of that system. And so that will be, one of the biggest items that is covered in the contract that we have.
Any questions for Ms. McConnell?
Just one. Who's responsible for the IT security? They are, right, for the data that we transmit to them and that they handle and they send out to all the reviewers?
Correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Members, is there a motion to approve the Grant Management Support Services contract with General Dynamics Information Technology for an amount not to exceed $9,984,746, and to approve an increase to the FY 2022 outside counsel contract with Baker Botts for an amount not to exceed $125,000?
So moved.
All in favor, vote aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Ms. McConnell, you're up next. Please present the fiscal year 2023 bond issuance resolution.
Yes, so the resolution requests that we finance not to exceed amount of $300 million in bond proceeds, and request that the Texas Public Finance Authority issue that debt on our behalf. What we actually do project that we will issue in FY23 is $298.3 million in commercial paper notes 4 times during the year. That covers not only our administrative operations, but also grant reimbursements or authorized advances related to awards. And now those awards, we do have active awards going back to 2014, but in terms of our bond issuance, that goes back now to just fiscal years 2016 forward. So that's really my presentation. I think you're very familiar with the general documents that in the bond proceeds. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Dr. Rosenfeld.
Just a quick question. How are the bond rates going as inflation goes up?
I think they are starting to go up. I haven't received any report from Texas Public Finance Authority, but when our go back. When our long-term general bonds were funded back in November of 21, the fixed rate bonds were at 2.19%, carried out to several more decimals, and that was in line. From what I've heard anecdotally, I think they are starting to creep up, but until we go out on the market, I can't tell you. I don't know that it's going to be significantly more. And I do know one thing to know is when TPFA runs projections, they actually look at historical data and run projections at anywhere from 6 up to 7%. So that way, they are very conservative in terms of how they project the debt to the cost to the state.
Thank you. Members, is there a motion to approve the resolution requesting financing for $300 million in bond proceeds by the Texas Public Finance Authority in fiscal year 2023?
So moved. Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries.
I had a quick question before you leave. We approve in the past on the GDIT contracts an up to amount each time.
Correct.
Where did those end up? Did they use the full amount, or was there any carryover or less?
We in most cases we didn't use the full amount. When we would carry over into the next year, that will not be the case. Like this year, I think you saw that we had about current year we have a $9.5 million contract. We probably won't use all of it, but we will use pretty much close to it.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. McConnell. Okay, members, we're going to go back to item 12. I'd like to recognize Mr. Roberts to present the presiding officer's new appointments to the Prevention Advisory Committee and the Product Development Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Dr. Cummings. At its May 5th meeting, the Board Governance Subcommittee discussed Presiding Officer Mahendra Patel's proposed appointments to the Prevention Advisory Committee and the Product Development Advisory Committee. The background of each of the appointees is behind tab 9. The subcommittee recommends approval of the appointments by the Oversight Committee, and I request your approval.
Members, any questions for Mr. Roberts? Is there a motion to approve the presiding officer's appointments to the Prevention Advisory Committee and the Product Development Advisory Committee?
So moved.
Second. All in favor, vote aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Members, the next two presentations will be from the Oversight Committee's advisory committees. CPRIT provided the advisory committee reports prior to the meeting, and I hope you've had a chance to review them. The chair from each advisory committee presenting today will join us via Zoom. Is that correct?
Actually, one's in person.
We have one in person. Sorry. Thank you. We have allocated each advisory committee 30 minutes to make their presentations and respond to questions from the Oversight Committee members. Dr. Smith, please introduce Andrew Strong and Dr. Michelle Park, who will provide the Product Development Advisory Committee's annual report.
Hi. So this is Andrew Strong, who is here in person today to
Yes,
present
thank
the
you.
annual review of the Product Development Advisory Committee, of which he's a co-chair with Dr. Michelle Park.
Thank you. Do we have Dr. Park?
Can you hear me? I'm on Zoom.
Yes,
so
thank you. We
hopefully
hear
you
you.
can hear me. Okay, terrific.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for this time today. It seems like I think the last time I was here was in 2019. And so when we were going through the legislative session for CPRIT 2.0, and so we've obviously been delayed by a couple of years. But we're very excited to be here in person and to present. Michelle and I will give a little bit of background on ourselves, and we'll talk about the committee and what we've done over the last 6 to 9 months. And as the co-chair with Michelle, what we wanted to do in this round is not just rehash the same stuff that we brought before, because really it boils down to two things. It's more applications, more money to product development. And I think that in recent times, and what we heard earlier today with respect to the report by Dr. Smith and Kristen, is that you guys have heard and you're making the right moves. And so we're actually making the right moves in probably one of the most challenging capital markets in decades for biotech. And so, our message is that now is the time for CPRIT to really hit the gas, because there's no better time than now when the best in class, the first in class technologies, those technologies that are differentiating, need funding because they can't get it from the capital markets right now. It's very challenging. So we've got some slides that we'll go through, and Michelle and I will do our best to kind of trade off, since she's remote and I'm here. But why don't we advance to the next slide? All right, so this is a little bit of background on myself. Some of you know me. I was a CPRIT awardee in 2011, started a company called Kalon Biotherapeutics, which was spun out of Texas A&M University System. We sold that company to Fujifilm Diosynth Biotechnologies, and I want to say right now, and Bill is familiar with that whole story, that CPRIT was instrumental in that company. I was the founding CEO, even though we were spun out of Texas A&M. We had a CPRIT grant very early in that company when we were basically 4 or 5 people. You should be proud to know that there's almost 1,000 employees employed in Bryan College Station right now, because we sold that company to Fujifilm Diosynth Biotechnologies at the end of 2014. And that is a success story. It's a huge success story. And frankly, people don't even know who I am anymore. If you ask who's Andrew Strong, like who? But that's okay, because we have this legacy, and CPRIT contributed to that legacy. So it's very exciting. So I spend the majority of my time counseling biotech companies. I consider myself a startup lawyer. I work in Houston at a law firm called Hogan Lovells, which is an international firm. But I help emerging biotech companies get out of the clinic, off the bench and in the clinic. And that's kind of that, from MD Anderson, Baylor, UT Southwestern, UT San Antonio, Texas Tech, taking those technologies, put them into biotech companies and letting them grow. And there's so many challenges that these companies have, and one of them is funding. And so that's why CPRIT comes in here, particularly in the oncology space. So I'll turn it over to Michelle, and she can talk about herself.
Thanks. Thanks, Andrew. So first, I just want to apologize for not being able to be present in person. It's a crazy time. We call it the 100 Days of May. And so with NEA's upcoming annual meeting and 2 daughters and struggling to manage 4 lacrosse teams between them and an upcoming middle school graduation and the frenzy around that. And then some outbreaks of COVID in the area. It's just prohibitive right now for me to leave San Francisco. So I apologize for that, but I am very pleased to be able to be here to present with Andrew. It's been a privilege to have been part of CPRIT's Product Development Advisory Committee these last 2+ years. It's really exciting to help Texas, help this organization continue to be a leader in supporting innovative science and developing truly transformative therapies in cancer. And, you know, at the same time, it helps to continue to build the cancer-focused infrastructure within the state. My background, originally, I was a molecular biologist. I did my PhD at Sloan Kettering with a focus on cell cycle control. So spent a number of years at the bench doing cancer research. For some reason, ended up on Wall Street after that. Was a biotech analyst covering the small cap and micro cap names for about 6 years, and then moved into venture. And this was in 2006, so over 16 years now. Spent about 14 years at Claris Ventures, where we covered pretty much the spectrum of therapeutics investing from early stage through late stage. Our focus originally was late stage, and then we progressively moved to later stage investing, and were subsequently acquired by Blackstone Life Sciences. During the latter part of my time at Claris, I did spend a lot of time focused on building a new fund for Claris, and that was the Claris Cancer Fund. So this was a focus on cancer therapeutics, and it was a hybrid model of investment and philanthropy. And this was in an effort to pretty much address the dwindling of public funds available for cancer, particularly for efforts to bridge discovery and translational research into early stage products from companies. And so that was an effort that I spent a lot of time working on. Once Blackstone acquired Claris, made the move to NEA Ventures, where I am currently a partner, a much larger initiative focused on therapeutics as well as devices, as well as digital health and healthcare services. So have been on the investing side for well over a decade and a half, and really excited to be able to offer any insights that I can to the P Dac.
Great. So why don't we move to the next slide, please? And so this is an overview of the P Dac, and you'll see in blue the new members that have been added, Gabby Everett and Biolabs, Pegasus Park. Wayne mentioned Pegasus Park. That's the new old Exxon building in Dallas that's been redone as a biotech hub, and they built a park around it. Biolabs is like J Labs in Houston. It's there as an incubator to support companies. Oh, I can do it myself. Great. And so Gabby Everett's the head of that. Victoria Ford took Tom Kowalski's position recently. We miss him, but she is doing a great job. Heather Hansen is the head of the Trade Association, Biomed San Antonio, and Dana Hargrove is the co-founder and president of Cancer Insight, which is a clinical research organization that's been very involved. And then our last new member is Tom Luby, who has tremendous experience from the Boston area. He's been at the Texas Medical Center Innovation. This used to be TMCX. Before that, he was the head of J Labs in Houston. Just a great group. So this group has been busy. We met on March 30th with CPRIT, and I think some of the members of the Product Development Subcommittee were on that meeting, and we talked about the new initiatives that Kristen and Ken have mentioned, particularly the expedited review and the bridge RFA. And so since that meeting, we broke up into groups, and we divide ourselves into 2 groups, one for the bridge RFA and one on the expedited process. And we wanted to focus on really giving comments back that are more than just, hey, do more of this, do more of that, really definable comments. So we're going to jump into those as part of our report. But first, I want to go to the next slide, and I can do that now. just to give you kind of a highlight of what's going on in the capital markets. I mean, if anybody owns a biotech stock or has followed biotech, you know that the market is, really in probably the worst it's been in quite some time. This is from Torreya Partners. It just shows the decline in biotech enterprise value of publicly traded companies since February of last year. And so this was at the end of April. Their last report shows a decline of 67%, not 63.8%. So we know that the market is contracting, and part of this is that valuations of many of these biotech companies were high, and now they're coming down. But no one expected it to come down this much. This next slide just shows you, again, biotech market by modality. So you can see some of the gene therapies were probably overinflated, but they're really getting crushed now. And so a lot of these companies are having to shed programs or put on the shelf programs that they were advancing and focusing on their lead programs. And then the last slide, I think this is really a pretty good slide just to help set the context of our comments today. This shows by stage of development in the companies. And I've surrounded kind of the bottom two, this preclinical phase one, because that's really where the product development focus has been. It's not to take companies that are commercial and help them with their commercial programs. It's really to hit that valley of death period where a company has started up, it's got good data, it's got some seed funding, and now it's kind of graduating from the incubator status and it's ready for CPRIT. And so that's the seed company. And the seed company goes to the company that needs the larger grant. And so if you think about it in context of development, a lot of this is still preclinical. Seed is mostly all preclinical studies that the companies need to do to reduce the risk. So early stage research way over here is the highest risk. There's a chance, a 10,001 chance that product early stage research is going to get to a commercial product. As you go through the pipeline, that risk reduced. So we're still kind of in that risk area, but we're not completely de-risked. When you move into phase one, now you're starting to test your drug on people. You're getting, an efficacy reading maybe, you're getting a toxicity reading. This is CPRIT's sweet spot. This is where CPRIT needs to play a big role, and it has been. We talk about, and we'll talk about the companies, that have been funded. Really, I think to go to one of Will's questions earlier, the problem isn't the companies that we've funded. They're all great companies. It's the ones that we've missed because the process has been too tight and the review process is too long. That's going to change, though. So despite the challenging biotech market, it's not like the oil bust that we all remember in the 80s. It is still growing. People are still hiring. What's the problem is that it's harder to find money. So technologies are getting better. People are still hiring. The capital markets are tight, but they're holding. And venture debt is another way in which companies are securing money is through kind of venture debt financing. So it's like a loan, but your capital, your security is your IP. And then I'll turn it over to Michelle if she wants to add anything to this before we jump to the next slide.
Yeah, Andrew, if you just want to go back one slide so that I can just further emphasize the point on how important it is, the red box, right? The target companies and the phase for which CPRIT's product development program would provide funding. Investing in these early stage companies where private capital is currently the hardest to obtain, that is critical right now. So what seemed to be an abundant supply of capital is rapidly dwindling. Securing capital in this market is becoming increasingly challenging. So this presents an ideal opportunity for CPRIT to step in with funding. So the timing it couldn't be better to deploy capital. And again, ultimately this does, as we all know, increase the number of cancer therapies that are in development in Texas, further stimulating the life sciences ecosystem. And success begets success. So as we generate more applicants, as we are able to enrich for stronger applications and streamline the process so that we're funding the most promising opportunities. It provides further catalysts for the development of new cancer centers, creating more excellence-based institutions throughout Texas.
Great. So we're going to jump into the 2021 recommendations. And so these are the same recommendations I think we've made over the past several years, but this year it's different. It's different because we have programs that have been brought to you that we think are going to make a difference. So more money is number one, and new opportunities. And so, our view is that the best way we increase the pipeline of applicants into CPRIT, its product development program, is to make awards. The more awards we make, the message gets out. If the process is streamlined, the people are, word of mouth is going to be our best advertisement. It's not going to be going to big events, and my personal opinion, it's the one-on-one, the CEO who got an award who tells all the other CEOs. CPRIT's where it's at now. That success begets success, just as Michelle said. And then we'll talk about the bridge RFA, but we're going to focus most of our comments today on recommendation 1. And so, number 1, the new process with this pre-application process going to full submission is beautiful. And the reason why it will work is that, from our perspective on the outside looking in, CPRIT's been more on the product development program, more rigid in terms of the application process. Companies, say this last round, 35 companies spent 2 to 3 months putting an application together, submitted it, and then it goes to 4 of perhaps 24 reviewers to look at their one application. They're scoring it, and then they're hoping that they got the right reviewers and that a 3-to-1 reviewer is the same as a 4 to another reviewer. We just don't know. And so we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But this pre-application process is a screening process, and it puts the PDRC members, who are typically at the very end of the process, on the front of the process, which is needed. And Michelle's going to talk to you about how investments are done from venture. And so what we see and what we have strongly recommended from the P Dac is that move away from this very rigid NIH model over to the BARDA-DARPA model. And if many of you know BARDA and DARPA, that is you go in, you present a pre-application or a pre-proposal, you get what's they call a tech watch in BARDA, and you have this initial screening. And BARDA says, we like that technology, submit a full proposal. This is very similar to that. And so we're really excited because we think that will unclog many of the bottlenecks that occur in the application process, and it will make the reviews more strategic. The other thing that it's going to be doing is it's going to create a potential pipeline for those that aren't ready to go to full application. You're going to identify some of the really up-and-comers, the new technology. Maybe they're not ready for the full application. Maybe they got to do 2 or 3 things, and then they can come back. But it's going to create this feeder system of the next and the best. And so that we think is really important. And then it's going, for those that just will never get there, we'll be able to say no, not interested, or, you're missing the mark. And so we've got to be able to separate. And so get the best of the best in, find those that are the up-and-comers and mentor and cultivate them, and then keep out the ones that would never make it to begin with. And so we think that is such an important part of this process. And as Michelle, and for those of you that don't know NEA, the firm that she's with now, it's one of the top life science venture capital firms in the world. And so we're very fortunate to have her input. And so kind of these, if you look at these points, the last point, which I want to turn over to her, and she's going to talk to you about how we think CPRIT should look at these companies. It should look at it from the perspective of, we're going to, I know we're not investing, they're grants, but let's just use the quotation, invest. We are going to invest in this company, and we want the brightest and the best. And so this pre-application process and the full application process aligns very beautifully with how venture looks at that. So I'll answer this next slide. Michelle, it's all yours.
Thanks, Andrew. Yep. So I think that From our perspective, and this is someone that I worked with who has decades of experience as a drug developer and a seasoned life sciences investor, he says, to find your prince, you have to kiss a lot of frogs. But our job is to be able to generate as many candidates that could potentially be that prince or princess, and very quickly identify the frogs so that you're not wasting any time. And so we've definitely been able to, on the life sciences venture side, streamline this process, because you definitely want to have deal flow. The more deals that are coming in your way, the more of a likelihood of finding some real promising opportunities. But you also have to have a process that can quickly manage the deal flow in a very efficient and productive manner. And so to be effective, the process, in my opinion, needs to be more of a venture investment opportunity diligence process. For greater success, you need to be able to follow through better, have more thorough diligence that starts with a potential champion for the select investment. One, if necessary, two reviewers that take the lead. They take ownership, and that's because the opportunity that's presented is within their domain expertise. This allows for better collaborative interactions, potential regular face-to-face, even if it's by Zoom or phone calls or email interactions. It creates the opportunity to quickly address questions, explain the technology better, the strategy, and the vision. And the process, what it involves is, I'll move to the full application process because I do think that is more relevant and that's the most time-consuming part. As I mentioned, you need to have one reviewer, maybe two, depending on the opportunity, who stays with the applicant. It's the champion for this. And this is what happens in a venture. In the venture community, you get a deal, somebody raises their hand to take a look at it. This is because they've looked at something in the past that's very similar, or because they have had a history of investing in that modality or approach. And this, again, enables the most thorough, productive diligence. You start to involve folks as you continue on in the diligence as needed in terms of getting some input on the clinical development side or the regulatory side. But in order to be able to keep it efficient and focused, you have one person who leads all of the diligence, is involved with that diligence, is involved with the communication with the applicant, and relays what their findings are on the diligence to the rest of the partnership. And then the rest of the partnership can provide feedback on other areas that they would like to see addressed. And it's an iterative process, but it's extremely productive, and it does not take 7 to 8 months. Generally, we're not tech VCs where it could take 2 days. We are biotech VCs where it could take 2 to 4 months. If you're following a company closely and it's one in the pre-application process that you have an interaction with, but they're just not ready to enter the full application process, that actually ultimately speeds up the full application process if they do get to a point where they are ready, because you're in pole position to be able to resume the diligence. You've already done some preliminary work, and that can also further streamline and abbreviate the process. I'll pause there, Andrew, to see if I've left anything out.
Sure. We're going to try to I think we may have blown through our time, but we're going to keep going.
Yeah.
So we'll get through this quickly and be open for questions. So the pre-application process, again, PDRC involvement is critical. And I think what Michelle's saying is that someone from the PDRC needs to have kind of assigned to each application that goes to a full application, because that person is going to be on the tail end, helping with the recommendation that PDRC will make. We think scientific merit, I don't think there's any debate, we're not debating this with CPRIT, they're in agreement. Scientific merit has to be first and foremost. Two of the recommendations we made, and we've had conversations with this, is that in that pre-application process, it's important to actually see the people that are making the presentation. Maybe it's a 30-minute presentation by Zoom, but just reading a document and looking at their slides, you just don't get the same level of engagement to know whether or not these people have kind of the it factor. Can they pull it off? Can they advance the science? Is this someone we want to really spend time going through a full application? So we think some type of Zoom presentation. And then the scoring, number 2 is one of our biggest comments on the scoring. We think that there needs to be a ramp for those that are really strong but not yet ready for the full application, and how that we work that out is going to be devil's in the details, because someone, maybe it's a consultant for CPRIT, maybe it's one of the local communities, should take that applicant and say, hey, you got a 2, we want to get you to a 1, here's what you need to do to get to a 1. And so that's the pre-application. We're almost done, promise. In the full application process, one of the major comments that we have and that we see over and over again is that when you, in the prior kind of full application review process of the panels, you have 2 panels effectively of 12 people each. The applications get distributed to, say, 4 panel members. And there may be a research scientist who's opining on whether or not the competitive landscape analysis is correct, or if their budget is correct. And so our main issue, and I think what Michelle was saying, is that when you go into venture looks at diligence, they take the finance people and they look at the budget. They take the regulatory people and they look at the regulatory plan. And they take the research scientists and they look at the preclinical data. They don't ask those 3 people to cover the whole application because they're outside their wheelhouse. Those people in venture then report back to, like Michelle, and say, here's what we got in each of our domain areas. And so that's really the main point of number 2, is that when you think of the reviewers, use their expertise and keep them in their wheelhouse where their expertise is. The third application is, the third point is then have them report back, and then ultimately, and I skipped through, sorry, but we just think that the process is streamlined. And so what CPRIT has proposed, the PD team, is fantastic. The 4 opportunities, the open BAA, this is going to dramatically increase the interest in CPRIT. And there's no better time than right now to do it. I mean, I'm excited about CPRIT coming to Bio. I'm sending companies to talk to them, and Ken doesn't realize this, but he's going to have a full plate of people that want to talk to him, and Tracy, I think, will be there as well. We really have such an opportunity. And if you think about what has occurred over the last 10 years in CPRIT, even since 2009, I mean, the product development program has done well. But could it do better? Absolutely. Could it just do incredibly better? Now is the time to do it. If you think of $700 to $800 million going into the biotech ecosystem in Texas, it's transformative. I mean, now is the opportunity. We should put as much, and of course we're biased, we're from product development, so we want to see as much money go into product development. But I can tell you, having been doing this, a 2011 CPRIT awardee, and seeing how we have grown the community, it's really an amazing opportunity for us. And so with that, I'll shut up and entertain any questions.
Thank you so much, both of you, for your presentation. Dr. Rice.
Andrew, thank you so much for being here for that report, and Michelle as well. I wondered, as I listened, it's always about the best science, and we have people reviewing, we're trying to get that, and there's always some look forward and some theorizing on if that's going to turn into an effective thing. So that's part of the experiment, quote unquote. Do you think we, as we score these things, undervalue, quote unquote, experience management, with the idea that experience management is going to figure out how to get there, and even if it means modulate, call an audible?
No
and
question.
do we underscore those management?
It's almost completely missed at the early review of the full application process historically. That's why I think, with the pre-application, the team science is clearly important, but having that face-to-face engagement, whether it's through a Zoom call, just to get a sense of the team. Are they savvy enough to weather the storms, right? Because every company is going to have a storm.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Michelle, you want to opine on that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that just being able to have that active dialogue, you can gauge very quickly versus on paper if the team has the ability to talk through the science, right? To really communicate the strategy to be able to address any technical questions on what they've achieved and what they plan to achieve and how they plan to do it. It's very important to be able to have that face-to-face. And it doesn't have to be live in person. It can be by Zoom.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to say, Bill, which it came up earlier, we always say to the companies that I'm talking to, what's your Texas story? You know, you have to have a Texas story. And you get them on Zoom early in that pre-application. What's your Texas story? What's your commitment to Texas? If they start to hem and haw, you're like, okay, maybe they're not the right team. I will say, and I was thinking about this and I didn't mention it, but the Zoom has changed where people live and work. Mm-hmm. And there's Dee, you may not know this, but there's a company in Houston, their chief scientific officer is based in El Paso. That's where she lives, that's where she works. And so we're getting geographic dispersion of the executives and the teams that are participating in all these CPRIT companies. They may have a Houston headquarters or a Dallas headquarters, but they're all over Texas. And that to me is a great thing because it's spreading it across the region. All right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Strong, Dr. Park, for your time. We greatly appreciate your efforts today. We're going to move on now to the Geographic Diversity Advisory Committee report. Dr. LeBeau, please introduce Dr. Sarah Williams-Blangero, who will provide the Geographic Diversity Advisory Committee annual report.
Thank you, Dr. Cummings. I'm really delighted to welcome Dr. Sarah Williams-Blangero, and I believe Dr. Ming Kang is also joining us. Dr. Williams-Blangero is the chair of our Geographic Diversity Advisory Committee, and Dr. Ming Kang co-chairs this committee. I just want to express my gratitude to both of these individuals. The committee has been very active in the past year and has come up with a number of very interesting and exciting, and I think impactful recommendations. Dr. Sarah Williams-Blangero is a genetic epidemiologist who received her doctorate in biological anthropology from Case Western Reserve University in 1987. She completed a postdoctoral fellowship in genetics at the Southwest Foundation for Biomedical Research, which is now the Texas Biomedical Research Institute, and was then appointed to the faculty of Texas Biomed in 1990. Dr. Williams-Blangero became chair of the Department of Genetics at Texas Biomed in 1990, and later the deputy director of the Southwest National Primate Research Center in 2012. In 2014, she moved to the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley to become the founding director of the South Texas Diabetes and Obesity Institute, and in 2017 was appointed chair of the Department of Human Genetics in the UTRGV School of Medicine. Dr. Williams-Blangero's research has focused on the genetic determinants of complex diseases in minority populations, including the Jarel ethnic group of Nepal and Mexican Americans. Welcome, Dr. Williams-Blangero.
Thank you. So this morning, I would like to give a brief overview of our work to date and the initial recommendations that the group has developed. So the Geographic Diversity Advisory Committee is charged with advising on the special needs and challenges associated with developing cancer research capacity at institutions located 100 miles or more from a National Cancer Institute designated center. That is, institutions which are distant from major research centers in Houston, Dallas, or San Antonio. The Geographic Diversity Committee was formed in the summer of 2021 and has met a total of 6 times since June 29th to develop its recommendations. The members of the committee are listed here and represent 7 different track-eligible institutions. The committee's work builds upon the Texas Regional Excellence in Cancer Awards, which were first funded last year. This funding mechanism is targeted towards those institutions located 100 miles or more from a National Cancer Institute designated center. The first track awards were made last year, and we're now in the midst of the second round with the letters of intent that were due on April 25th. The track was modeled after the Centers for Biomedical Research Excellence, which are funded by the National Institutes of Health as part of the IDEA States program. And the IDEA program is managed by the National Institute of General Medical Sciences at the NIH. The goal of the program is to broaden the geographic distribution of NIH funding for biomedical and behavioral research by enhancing the competitiveness for research of institutions that are located in states in which the success rate for NIH funding traditionally has been low. And the COBRIT programs are designed to build that competitiveness and research capabilities. I'm going to use the term track eligible institutions as a label for those institutions that are remote from an NCI designated center. What is it that track eligible institutions bring to cancer research in the state of Texas? Many of these institutions have research and clinical programs that are focused on addressing cancer health disparities. Research at these institutions is often focused on underserved minority populations that are also underrepresented in research at the national level. Another important factor to consider is that these institutions have diverse student populations. Developing cancer research programs at these institutions involve students at both the undergraduate and graduate levels in cancer research, and opens up interest in and opportunities for future careers in cancer research. Ultimately, this will lead to the diversification of the biomedical research workforce, a critical need identified by the National Institutes of Health. Diversity and inclusion in research are critically important for Texas because we have large minority populations. Minority populations are understudied in NIH-funded research, even for those diseases that disproportionately affect minority populations. Consistent with the situation in basic biomedical research, minority populations are underrepresented in clinical trials. So, for example, if we look at the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley as a sample institution, this university is located in a predominantly Hispanic area where over 80% of the local population is Hispanic and over 90% of our students are Hispanic. The region has a high prevalence of risk factors for cancer in the population, in the Hispanic population, in which over 50% of the population is obese. Fatty liver disease rates are high, and there are high rates of exposure to pollutants and agricultural pesticides. The region served by UTRGV has significant cancer health disparities, particularly for liver cancer and for cervical cancer. It's also one of the most economically disadvantaged areas in the country, a factor which impacts health outcomes for local cancer patients. To take another example, the Texas Tech University Health Science Center in El Paso is the only health science center located on the U.S.-Mexico border. The population it serves is over 80% Hispanic. Cancer is a leading cause of death among Hispanics in the region, and there are significant disparities in outcomes for breast cancer, liver cancer, pancreatic cancer, and leukemia. Track-eligible institutions often are located in areas where the local population experiences cancer health disparities, and there is a critical need for research that will lead to medical advances related to cancer. At these resource-limited institutions, CPRIT funding has a transformational rather than an incremental impact on cancer research. The tremendous impact that such funding can have on cancer research is evident from the 2 track awards that have been made to date. With less than 1 year's funding so far, Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center and the University of Texas El Paso have been able to make remarkable progress. Texas Tech University Health Science Center chose to focus on cancer developmental therapeutics. The key elements of their research center are senior faculty with active funded programs in developmental therapeutics, core resources that are necessary for that research, a steady pipeline of trainees that includes both MDs and MD PhDs, and recruitment of outstanding junior faculty that are building that critical mass of faculty in cancer research. The progress to date includes the implementation of 4 well-functioning cores, including an administrative core, a biobanking core, a pharmacology core, and a regulatory sciences core. These cores provide critical infrastructure for cancer researchers at the institution. The development of the statistical and bioinformatics core is ongoing, and the funding has brought junior faculty together on a monthly basis for discussions of research progress and plans for grant applications. The first 4 junior faculty who are supported by the track are carrying out track-funded research. A mentoring program for the track-funded and other junior faculty in cancer research has been launched, and recruitment for the leader of the bioinformatics and statistical core and additional junior faculty is ongoing. Since the track funding was awarded, senior faculty in the track have received 3 grant awards in developmental therapeutics, 2 from the National Institutes of Health and 1 from CPRIT, and they are participating in phase 1 and phase 3 clinical trials. And the data they are generating are being used to support the development of multiple national clinical trials. The second funded track is at the University of Texas, El Paso. Here, the track is used to support translational cancer research by junior faculty and to develop a mentoring program in collaboration with MD Anderson. The elements of the award include research projects on cancer health disparities, mentors from the MD Anderson Cancer Center, a grant mentoring program administered at UTEP, and a faculty recruitment effort. So to date, and again, this is in less than a year, the mentoring program has been established with 5 early stage investigators paired with MD Anderson mentors. The grants related training has resulted in the submission of 2 CPRIT applications and 4 NIH grant applications, with 1 NIH application likely to be fundable. An NIH-funded investigator from Stony Brook was successfully recruited to pursue research in pancreatic cancer. And the UTEP Border Biomedical Research Center faculty are in the process of developing a CPRIT core facilities grant. As UTEP moves forward, the ultimate goal is to become a designated cancer center, as a range of major planned projects are developed for funding from the National Cancer Institute. And I just wanted to touch on the Border Biomedical Research Center that I referred to earlier. It's supported by an infrastructure grant from NIH called an RCMI. The research centers at minority institutions are designed to build research capacity at institutions that receive less than $50 million a year in NIH funding. These grants support pilot study funding, faculty recruitment, faculty development and training, and community engagement. And so the RCMI at UTEP is a much more established infrastructure support grant, and again, highlights the transformative nature of this kind of support to track eligible institutions. The RCMI funding has been leveraged into significant NIH funding, allowed expansion of the community health worker workforce with a grant from the private foundation, and helped to attract philanthropic funding to address health disparities. So again, our committee advises on the special needs and challenges in developing cancer research capacity at track eligible institutions. These institutions are often resource limited for research. They often lack a critical mass of investigators focused on cancer research. They lack funding for the all-important pilot studies that generate the preliminary data that are required to support your NIH grant applications. And they may lack some key equipment or infrastructure elements. So to grow cancer research in track eligible institutions and to allow them to become self-sustaining within 10 years, additional funding opportunities targeted towards these institutions are needed. These funding mechanisms would build on the track infrastructure to enhance cancer research capacity through development and enhancement of additional infrastructure, specialized instrumentation, investigator development and recruitment, and pilot studies. Pilot study funding is absolutely critical for proof of principle experiments and for generating the preliminary data required in applications to demonstrate the feasibility of a proposed study. These two-year projects would be relatively low-cost investments for CPRIT, but would have a major impact on the abilities of investigators from track-eligible institutions to generate competitive grant applications for the National Institutes of Health and other agencies. Postdoctoral fellows are those recently trained scientists who bring new skills and ideas to laboratories, and they're vital for the growth of scientific programs. The costs of supporting a postdoc are about $100,000 per year, and a 4-year institutional postdoctoral training program supporting between 2 and 5 postdocs would allow track-eligible institutions to both grow their scientific workforce and their research programs in cancer. Major instrumentation can be another stumbling block for track-eligible institutions. 1-year grants for up to $2 million would support purchase of critical equipment that can then be leveraged by researchers into new extramural funding. Minority populations, as we discussed, are underrepresented in clinical trials, and there's considerable interest in increasing the number of underrepresented minorities in clinical trials. Track-eligible institutions are well placed to contribute to this effort. However, the infrastructure required to participate in clinical trial studies may not be available. 2-year awards of $500,000 per year would allow track-eligible institutions to establish that infrastructure to support clinical trials for items like equipment, biobanking, and or process development that could bring clinical trials to the medically underserved populations with which track-eligible institutions work. As the members of the committee have learned through our 6 meetings, there are many exciting things going on in cancer research at track-eligible institutions and lots of opportunities for collaboration, sharing of resources, and leveraging of partnerships. Again, this would be a relatively low-cost investment for CPRIT. A 1-year competitive grant of $50,000 could be used to support a meeting that would bring together researchers from track-eligible institutions to discuss achievements in cancer research with underserved populations and further explore potential collaborations. I talked earlier about institutional training grants for postdoctoral fellows, but we feel there's also great value to individual postdoctoral training grants that recent doctoral graduates could apply for to further their research and training at track-eligible institutions. Program project support would allow multidisciplinary groups of investigators to pursue 3 coordinated synergistic projects supported by an administrative core and associated with a mentoring program. Program projects provide tremendous training opportunities for students and postdocs and can also lead to spin-off projects that leverage the resources and findings of the program. And these would be funded at $3.5 million over 4 years. Finally, we thought another useful approach for building cancer research programs at track-eligible institutions would be a mechanism focused on building equal partnerships between established research centers and track-eligible institutions that could leverage the expertise and resources present at both institutions. There are also some things that can be done during the application process that might help track-eligible institutions become more competitive for CPRIT funding. The easiest change that we recommend is adding a checkbox to the application to allow an institution to indicate that it is a track-eligible institution. This would help facilitate the review process. We also recommend that improved guidance be provided to applicants related to the institutional letter of support. To help reviewers understand the level of the institution's commitment to growing cancer research, the letter of support really needs to articulate the institution's overall vision for the development and expansion of cancer research, the commitment to protected time for the faculty who are focused on cancer research, and of course, the commitment of space, technical support, and maintenance contract support that is required to fully realize the research opportunities that CPRIT funding will provide. With respect to the review process, we recommend that TREC eligible institution applications be grouped together during the review process to minimize or make clear that there's not a direct comparison with those proposals from highly resourced institutions. And this is often done at NIH when you see new investigator applications grouped together. We also recommend developing materials for the reviewers, such as a fact sheet that describes the characteristics of TREC eligible institutions, so that reviewers can appreciate both the limitations with which investigators at these institutions work and the great opportunities for innovation and inclusion of diverse populations in research and the workforce in research that these institutions provide. And finally, related to the review process, we recommend that the balance on review committees be improved by recruiting cancer researchers from institutions similar to TREC eligible institutions to serve on CPRIT review committees. There are outstanding cancer researchers at centers in the IDEA states we discussed earlier that have low overall levels of NIH funding in those states, and at RCMIs, the research centers at minority institutions. These reviewers could provide fresh perspectives in the evaluation of all applications, including those from TREC eligible institutions. In the early days of this program, when there are just 2 TREC awards still in their first year, we're already thinking about the sustainability of these cancer research programs. Only 1 renewal of a TREC award is allowed, meaning that a self-sustaining cancer research program needs to be developed over a 10-year period. Implementation of additional funding mechanisms that we have recommended to be targeted towards TREC eligible institutions will help ensure that TREC programs become sustainable in the long term, leading to improved cancer health for all Texans. The natural geographic expansion that will occur with the limitation to a single renewal of a TREC ultimately will maximize the number of TREC awards so that high quality cancer research and cancer care is available across all of Texas. On behalf of the committee, I want to thank you for the opportunity to discuss the TREC program, the challenges that TREC eligible institutions face, and the great progress in cancer research and care for underserved populations that can be achieved through expansion of funding mechanisms targeted towards TREC eligible institutions. Our goals going forward are focused on building a sense of community among investigators based at TREC eligible institutions, in addition to continuing to address the challenges and opportunities that face investigators at these institutions. These include identifying resources and opportunities at TREC eligible institutions that might cooperatively be shared to enhance cancer research, for example, access to specialized major equipment. Along those lines, we would like to explore how might foster increased collaboration between the TREC eligible institutions with the ultimate goal of reducing cancer health disparities. We would like to develop some recommendations for approaches to tracking the progress and impact of the TREC awards, especially highlighting the impact of research with and for medically underserved populations. And finally, we would like to facilitate some meetings of investigators from the TREC eligible institutions with those investigators at the currently funded TREC institutions to learn more from prior successes and again to foster collaboration between these institutions. So I thank you for your patience and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Williams-Bonjero, for your presentation. It appears that we've got a lot of opportunity here. I was noticing at the very beginning you mentioned that the deadline for the next cycle's letters of intent was on April 25th. So can you give us an idea of how many we could expect maybe be putting through applications for the next cycle? Or maybe Dr. LeBeau would tell us.
Idea of that.
We received 5 letters of intent from 4 eligible institutions. And I think that the 4 eligible institutions have really interesting and exciting applications. And to the point that Dr. Williams-Bonjero was making, they are already reaching out to the 2 TREC-funded institutions to establish relationships and to develop interactions for their application.
Very good. Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Dr. Hernandez.
Very good presentation. Thank you. And Wayne and Oversight Committee members, thank you we know why this was implemented. You guys are always forward thinking and being aggressive. And Wayne, thank you very much for looking out for the entire state of Texas, as you always have. It's very exciting times for Texas, especially for cancer research. And a couple of things I do want to point out is, one, is I agree with the doc that you should put them together, especially when they're being reviewed. And also, we have so many reviewers, and we have new ones coming in, that they may get lost in the shift, so a little check mark would help. The funding is good, but I think there's room for improvement when it comes to overall funding, especially with the grant amounts that are given. And the timetable, I always see this in every different committees that I'm involved with, 10 years plan. I don't know where people get this 10-year plan from, but things can be moved up as fast as you need them to be. And I would urge the committee to consider more of a 5-year plan, not a 10-year plan. That seems to be, there's a lot of human lives involved for to be waiting around for 10 years, for people to get up to par at those institutions. Because that's what I saw being printed on this document. They're recommending a 10-year plan. And that's all I was going to comment on.
Do you want to comment on that, Dr. Williams-Bonjero? I think you
meant
funding for 10 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
The goal is to build the cancer research program as fast as possible, of course, but it does take considerable time to build that capacity in terms of number of investigators, but it is scalable by funding. So if there's a big investment up front, you can move that forward more rapidly. That's true. So yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's my point. It's all about the funding, but regardless, I want to make a great comment to my colleagues. Great work to all of you, Wayne and Dr. LeBeau. Thank you.
And a related point, Dr. Hernandez, is that that the institutions have asked us to consider more than one renewal so that there's greater sustainability and that the funding can be extended beyond 10 years. So that's also something for us to consider.
Yes, ma'am. All right. Thank you, Doc.
Thank you very much. Again, thank you for your presentation, Dr. Williams-Bonjero. We appreciate you very much. We are going to move now to item 18, the communications report. The chair will recognize CPRIT's Communications Director, Mark Leffler, to update us on CPRIT's communication activities.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. You will find my memo under tab 15, the last tab, saving the best for last. I will be brief. A couple notable items for you is that we do have a possible Houston Chronicle story out there, which I think should be a good story. It's been in the works for some time, so it's maybe on life support, but it's going to be about the Houston Biotech development and CPRIT's role in that. It may be a smaller footnote, but we should hopefully be in that story. So that's positive. I'll keep you updated on that. And then the next thing is, as promised at the last meeting, I would give you an update on our social media, and you can see that on the last page. There is some moderate increase in social media, so that's a good sign. So at least we're moving in the right direction, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Members, do you have any questions for Mr. Leffler? Thank you very much. Appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move to item 22. We will not take up standing agenda items 19, 20, or 21. Our next regular Oversight Committee meeting will be on August 17th. I'm assuming that's going to be here.
As it stands now, yes.
As it
sir.
stands now. We have a comment that we will likely have a special meeting beforehand with the advisory committee and review councils, and that has been scheduled for June 20th.
Yes, sir.
From 1 to 4 p.m. So we're going to...
We don't know how long it's going to take, so.
Well, 1 o'clock anyway. We'll
What, 1 o'clock till whenever.
Yeah, very good. If there's no further business and no objection, the chair moves to adjourn this meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Meeting stands adjourned at 11:57 a.m.